We'll be going live in 5 seconds.
Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich regular meeting of Council on June 10th, 2025. We welcome everyone here today and all those watching on YouTube. I'll start with roll call. I'm Mayor Johnson, present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. Before we get going on the agenda items, we need to reconvene in open session. A motion to reconvene. Councillor Bryant, Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor? That's carried. June is Pride Month, and the community is invited to the annual Woolwich Pride event happening this Saturday from 1 to 4 at Gibson Park in Elmira. We hope to see everyone enjoying the live entertainment, food vendors, kids' activities, fire truck display, and the CrossFit Elmira obstacle course. It's always a good time, so come on out. June is also National Indigenous History Month in Canada, a meaningful opportunity to learn about, recognize, honor, and celebrate the rich cultures, languages, traditions, and enduring strength of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. This month invites us all to acknowledge their vital contributions and unique experiences. We encourage everyone to continue exploring and honoring Indigenous histories and cultures throughout the year, fostering understanding, respect, and reconciliation beyond June. With these reflections in mind, I will continue with our land acknowledgement. The Township of Woolwich acknowledges with deep respect that the land we call home has existed since time immemorial, long before our communities were formed and long before we arrived here. Indigenous peoples have had a deep and lasting relationship with this land, caring for it, learning from it, and living alongside all it sustains. We are grateful to the First Peoples who have lived on and cared for this land and who continue to do so today. In particular, we recognize the Chinatan, also known as the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people. We honor their deep connection to this land, and we acknowledge their wisdom, resilience, and leadership. These communities have protected and cared for the land with respect, responsibility, and a sense of shared trust. As we move forward, we hope to build a future based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and stronger relationships with one another. May we continue to learn together, to care for each other, and to honor all who share this place with us. Do council members have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There are no items to come forward from closed and no public meetings. We have one delegation listed this evening. If you are a delegate, your time limit is posted on the agenda. There will be a timer on the screen, and you will hear a warning sound when you have 1 minute left, and again when your time is up. For all those speaking to council tonight, once you are finished, you can return to your seat and are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or leave when you wish. And our first item is a topic that council deferred from the previous meeting. Before we hear from the delegate, I'll call on Director of Development Services, Deanne Fries, for an update. Deanne.
Thank you. So the memo that's included in your agenda with the original report for the Elmira and St. Jacob staging is just explaining that we would like to move ahead with the Elmira framework for staging and allocation of population, but have removed the St. Jacob's framework and allocation for staging of population. The reason for that is we now have both of the remaining lands that are developable in St. Jacobs. We have applications on both those properties that we have received, and we are in the process of reviewing those applications. The servicing for those areas and the ultimate population numbers may change. We have a lot more information now that we have the full application and we've started our review. And therefore, at this time, we don't think that the St. Jacob staging, first of all, is necessary to have that staff recommendation. That council staff recommendation to council and that council decision. If council wanted to continue with the decision, staff continues to recommend the equal allocation framework. However, at this time, we think that we can work through these two development applications a little further, and ultimately we would have to come back to council with approval of the subdivisions for allocation at that time.
Councillor, are there questions for Deanne? No? Not seeing any right now. Vaughn, you're kind of back there. Our delegation tonight is Vaughn Bender of Schlegel Urban Developments. Go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz and members of council. I think I won't take 7 minutes even tonight. Just here to say that we at Schlegel Urban Developments support the staging and allocation discussions for St. Jacobs being decoupled from the staging framework for Elmira. As Ms. Fries has indicated, our application is in and complete. The other property in St. Jacobs is in and complete as well. And we believe that the review process, which is now unfolding, that detailed process does present the forum for further discussions, considerations, and we're hopeful a resolution that is workable. So thank you.
Okay. Are there questions? No. Councillor Schwinn.
I'll put Mr. Bender on the spot. I believe you're coming forward next month with a more detailed plan of subdivision, or is that possibly going to get postponed to early August?
A public meeting date has been offered to us, and I don't have that in my memory right now. The precise date, I want to say June. Yeah.
Or June?
That sounds right. I don't have that date in front of me, but yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you for that. I see Mike Pupolo in the gallery too. I don't know if were you hoping to say anything or just listen? Is council amenable? Can I have a motion? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Bryant, all those in favor of hearing him? Go ahead. Can you press the, there we go.
So, there we go. Good evening. My name is Mike Pupil. As you guys very well know, co-CEO Polo Corp Inc. and one of the two listed developers in the staging policy for St. Jacobs. Just want to say we agree with the original planning and engineering opinion in the follow-up memo that staging should be based on equal allotment. But we understand that planning staff would like to understand the form of each respective development. As such, we are supportive of the deferral as outlined in the June 10th memo in your package. We look forward to discussing with staff further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Pupolo while we have him? No. Okay, thank you. The development in St. Jacobs is important. There's three main pieces to it. And so I hope that we can all work together and find a solution that's suitable for everybody. Anything else? No. Okay, there is a recommended resolution. If anyone wants to go there. Councillor Cadeau, you're going to move it? Councillor.
Point of order, is that as it was shown, so with the adopted St. Jacobs population projection or with the deferral?
So this is different than what I think I have on my screen.
So through you, Mayor Shantz, clerk's office worked with the Development Services Office on a recommended resolution that is included on the cover page of the agenda. It has 2 points: to adopt Elmira's population projection and staging allocation, and direct staff to provide an update to the Elmira staging and development plans within 6 months. That's a summary, but that's essentially what we're suggesting. That would essentially not be approving the St. Jacobs allocations, and that would come forward at a later date.
Do you need to see that? Do you all have that wording? Yes, okay.
I guess I've seen two different versions. of the wording, so
Can
I'm
it-
curious which one.
Put a wording up on the screen that is the one that we're dealing with, just for clarity, please. Yeah, no, it's,
I think we're just working.
okay. I think the basic intent is that we just deal with the Elmira piece and that the St. Jacobs piece will then come back at the date that you were considering.
Yes, so the reason why the St. Jacobs is removed from the resolution is because we may or may not have to come back at all if all of the allocation and staging is used up completely, or if we do come back, we don't want a timeline associated with it because we don't know what that timeline might be for processing these applications. So that's why we chose to just remove the St. Jacobs from the recommendation and just proceed with Elmira.
But timing is important to
We will
sort out
continue,
the.
yeah, we will continue to process the development applications, but the staging of development plan may not be necessary if we use up all the remaining land in
Yeah.
St. Jacobs.
Understood. Okay. So you can see on this screen what it is that staff has put forth.
And
Councillor Grant,
presuming that that's what Councillor Trudeau was moving, I will second that.
thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schwint.
Makes sense in principle. I'm just curious, are both of the developers on board with this? So I've seen, I guess, minor tweaks.
So this is just dealing with Elmira. I think for these developers, there isn't a motion here for St. Jacobs at this point. If I understand correctly, there'll be some more work done on that in conjunction with the developers, and then the date in July that you're choosing to call us back from vacation is when we'll deal with the details around it. Is that fair?
So right now, Vaughn's subdivision is scheduled for a public meeting for July 22nd. And we do have two others that would be coming forward on July 22nd. So all the details won't be ironed out at that point, but that will be the statutory public meeting date.
So is that your question to Vaughn and Mike?
I know we're good on Myra. This is wordsmithing. I'm seeing this word general in an email that's in and out of the motion.
Deanne?
Yeah, I would say that through you, Madam Mayor, if Vaughn wanted to speak to that additional word that he was looking at adding, I would say maybe we put it back to him. That's
Council okay to call Vaughn back up? Yeah. Just press the button again. Thanks.
Thank you. So we're talking about the Elmira staging policy now, and I think my comment was not meant to be unhelpful. It was just kind of making the point, as I understand it, you know, the staging and the allocation recommendations of staff, I'll say at a higher level, at a more general level, are meant to be directional. They're not perhaps completely definitive in the absence of plans of subdivision or plans of condominium being finalized. And that's where I thought that additional word, you know, in general accordance with, or in general, I can't even see the word, the general accordance with the plan, you know, it underscores that there's a level of refinement that may come as council makes its final decisions on any application that comes before it. So that was my unrequested input into that resolution.
So softening the definitive nature.
It's not really
of
meant
Elmira.
to soften it as much as acknowledge, as I understand it, that there is a level of final recommendation that council may make based on, you know, community priorities or density or, you know, other infrastructure needs that are being completed, et cetera. that is part and parcel of council's final consideration when making the quote unquote final decision. So I just thought it was
Okay.
maybe for the public and those of us a little bit more removed, it helps explain, the framework a little bit better.
Dan, thanks.
Yes, staff is fine with adding the word in allocation in general accordance. That's meant to be a framework that we're getting council support for, so we're fine with adding that word.
Nathan, Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, you're okay. Councillor Schwentz.
Apologies for wasting a bunch of time on that one word, but I think it's important that we as council, we're supporting this, we've got a direction, but I'm really hoping that both developers and staff are doing a lot of work the next few months to come up with a resolution to this. I don't think council's in the best position to make an arbitrary decision. I think the developers and staff could come up with the best plan. So I'm really hoping the next month or 6 weeks, there's some honest conversations that can lead to a really good outcome.
Okay, thanks. Not seeing any other questions. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So we'll see you back here in July. Okay. We have several consent items for approval. Does anyone want to move something? Councillor Bryant.
I wanted to pull the motion for the speed cameras to deal with that one, please.
Jeff, can you direct council where that is?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, that would be under the summary of recommendations from Committee of the Whole from May 27th, and it is item number 2. If you wanted to, we could vote on the remainder of the consent agenda, and then my recommendation would be to come back to the rural speed strategy.
I'm happy to move the remainder.
I am. Yeah, okay, it's just number 2 that you're, yeah. Okay, seconder, Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Number 2, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Pardon me. I do have a petition coming forward in the Committee of the Whole regarding speed cameras, and I have some concerns with the time frame in which the cameras in that motion would be running. For example, it was mentioned that they wouldn't run through the summer months, basically when school was not in session. But during that time frame, a lot of schools are now running summer camps, so the schools are still being utilized, even though not for school purposes. So I'm very reluctant to restrict it to 9 months of the year, and I think it's more difficult to control that if you're only doing it for certain months of the year. And timeframes, I think, would be a very difficult thing to manage. So I have no issue with having the region consult with us on anything. But when we start putting restrictions in place, I think we're tying our hands and we're tying everybody's hands involved with this. So I think we need to be more general and basically stick with the consultation process.
So I'm wondering if you're actually speaking to number 3. That
Number 1, I think it was.
Number
I'm just
1.
trying to find it on here. I think it was number 1 that was
Speed limits in front of schools on regional roads outside of sediment boundaries should be reduced to 60 kilometers per hour from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to
Right.
Friday through the months of September to June.
Yeah.
But regular speed limits should be maintained outside of those speed limited hours.
so that's outside the settlement areas is where you're talking.
Right, right. That particular one, sorry, my voice keeps fading out
No,
here.
that's okay.
I just don't feel putting in those restrictions are going to benefit us. I think if anything, it's going to tie our hands on anything we want to do going forward.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I would agree with Councillor Bryant. I think that our schools are areas of community engagement and community gatherings outside of regular school hours. So I would agree with not restricting the months. I would like to push council to also ignore the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think when it comes to speed enforcement around school areas, that it is a behavioral modification tool. Basically, it prevents people from speeding. And I think by entering in a specific time frame in which those hours are enforced doesn't address the core issue, which is the behavior of speeding. I think if you're speeding at 2 p.m., you're also going to be speeding at 2 a.m. So I feel that it's something that we need to just kind of throw away and not have as a part of it.
Councillor Schwint.
Yeah, I guess I'm approaching this speed zones in schools for students are there, society will accept. And bring in rules and regulations where society doesn't generally accept them doesn't lead to better behavior through rules there. It leads to worse behavior because people will just say, this is a stupid rule. It shouldn't apply ever. Where are these people coming from? Whereas if people understand the logic, the basis of safety for our children when they're in school, I think we get a lot of acceptance and better buy-in. So that's why I'm in favor of keeping the restrictions on the times to get that better buy-in. Speeding on its own is pretty arbitrary, depending on where you are, what time of day, what traffic conditions are. There's times when 40 kilometers an hour is speeding. There's times when 120 kilometers an hour is not on the same road, depending on weather conditions, traffic, etc. So to gain community acceptance, I think we've got to bring some parameters in speed cameras. Otherwise, they're not going to be accepted.
Councillor Cadeau, and then Councillor Grant, and then Councillor Bryant.
Tend to agree with the sentiment of Councillor Swint there. I'm hoping to get some input from Director Poupé, though. I know that this has been spoken about before, and I'm wondering if any preliminary work has been done to assess the viability of this.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to council. So I think a couple pieces, we are not experts. I want to start there. Township staff are not experts on ASE. So this is information that we are gathering. It is a regional initiative. I want to be clear for the public as well. ASE is being implemented on all roadways where at school zones. That was the plan as a direction from regional council to regional staff. So that includes regional roads, that includes local roads. I think what's happening now is there is, I guess, some discussions at various council tables about local roadways. So I want to leave the regional piece out of this because I believe they have jurisdiction over that road and they can implement what they see fit through their council. So to speak to ASE in general terms, I think is important because it would apply to our local roads where we would have jurisdiction. Timed enforcement is not best practice and it's not really enforceable if ASE was to be implemented. So it's not to say that our council could not move to timed enforcement, but I think what's going to happen if that is to occur, there won't be automated speed enforcement then at those locations. So I think that's important. ASE and timed enforcement need to be separated. If you want to look at timed enforcement, there is no ASE. So now you're back to having WRPS attend and apply enforcement. I think that's a big difference there. And there's a number of instances where larger centers have moved away for time enforcement for that very reason. So it was implemented, it still exists. I want to be clear about that, but it is not a best practice and it doesn't work well with ASE. Something that the township is bringing forward too is community safety zones are looked to being applied at all school zones. That is a best practice right now with ASE as well, and that is coming as about because of automated speed enforcement that community safety zones be applied at all school zones. Obviously, community safety zones add a doubling of the fine, so there's a hope there for some compliance just on the monetary penalty as well. And again, that would be planned to be enforced with by ASE. Flashing beacons. Again, are if they're installed, they are not, again, aligned with ASE. So it doesn't, you can have flashing beacons. It just is notifying a motorist that, hey, you're in an area that you should be paying attention and monitor speed. But we should not link flashing signs and automated speed enforcement. Again, those two are not hand in glove. They're separate issues and separate items. One does not, if flashing beacon, we can't rely on that for enforcement is the point. I think that's another piece too. And I'm just reading off a quick email that I got, so bear with me for a quick second here is, I think that The other piece that's important to note is that there's still some work in progress here with automated speed enforcement. So some of the larger centers are looking at exploring. So there's a transitionary piece between when a speed zone is changing. So as we can appreciate, if you have a 60-kilometer-an-hour roadway and you're going to transition to a 40-kilometer across the speed zone, there's a transitionary speed limit in there. And there's some concern about that transition and when ASE is applied. So there's work being done on that. Because again, I think everybody needs to appreciate that, you know, it's not all about just getting you right at that moment. Oh, look, you're right there where it changed, you're done. So there's some review of that and where that is going to be enforced. So I think there's some work to be done on that piece. And that I also think the other part that I was made aware of is instead of flashing beacons or timed time of day enforcement, View, and this is Toronto, Kingston, and Brampton are the municipalities that I've been made aware, are looking at variable message radar speed signs, so sort of letting people know schools in process, that sort of thing. So that's another piece that is, again, sort of doing the same thing that I think this council was looking for, is notifying the public, making them aware of what's happening and what's going to be enforced. I think if I kind of read the intent of the resolution. So I think because there's a few moving pieces, because this is not an area of expertise from township staff, again, I would recommend that we make a resolution very generic that we can then work with and then make a decision. I think when some of these pieces are fleshed out, I think that would be more appropriate and would help at least gather more information and still stay aligned in the program. I think the program was designed to protect people, protect our most vulnerable. Who doesn't want to slow people down in a school zone and protect children? And that's not just walking along the street. That is people coming in and out of a school zone, having a safe place. You know, kids are there. Parents are dropping children off, as we all know, all the time. So there's a whole lot of pieces. And the original intent of this was it's a school zone. Who couldn't support that? So I think that would be staff's request, is that we look to modify, at least at this stage, until we get a chance to get more information, speak to the region as things are evolving there, to see what that rollout looks like. It's likely that there's some pausing happening now, just as seeing some of the changes that are occurring. And there are other councils that are looking at this differently. I'm just asking that our council stay in line with the program right now until we know more information, would be a staff request. But again, that's council's decision to debate.
I lost I think Kayla and then
Yeah,
Bonnie.
thank you through the rest of council. I appreciate Jared's input. He kind of undermined what I was about to say, which was, I appreciate Councillor Schwint's kind of point that residents need to see that there's some sort of reason behind it, and that gives the buy-in. So that being said, I would be more inclined to keep the per hour, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would like to see the months of September to June be removed. Just for an example, last Friday, I was surprised to see 4 busloads of kids come into the former St. Boniface school property in Maryhill. That's not a school zone, but it was obviously being used by the school board for a June camp day. So just to reiterate what Councillor Bryan was saying, was that these are areas that the community goes to. There are areas of gathering, and that can fall outside of either regular school hours, regular school months, or in this case, a decommissioned school property. So just again, I'd like to kind of reiterate that I'm in favor of seeing those kind of limitations being removed.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I agree with all these comments, but I look at one school in particular, the one I'm bringing the petition forward. It's signed as a 60-kilometer zone. They are going through there at least 90, and I know that's on the paperwork that Jared has with the speeds and various information. So I really am concerned about what is going on. They're doing it outside of school hours. They're doing it all the time, and we've got kids to protect. And the petition I'm bringing forward was brought by the children because they are concerned. They're seeing their parents coming out of the school, trying to turn left into all this traffic that's coming through there 90 or more when it's a 60 zone, and that's could be after 7 because they run after hour events, could be on weekends. And during the summer, I know there is camp running all summer through that school. So I am very concerned with putting restrictions in place but those are my thoughts.
Counselor Schwint
I guess,
and Counselor Cadeau.
so I guess I'm gonna push back in the other direction. What other measures are we taking for traffic calming in front of St. John Marwick School? If we've got speeding happening, I'm sorry, but I do not believe that automated enforcement is the answer to solving the problem. It's how do we get drivers wanting to drive slower on that road? Can there be other traffic calming measures that make sense, other signage, that will cause people to slow down? If it's straight enforcement, I think we need police out there, but cameras are not the answer in my mind.
And that is a regional road.
Thank you. I did have a discussion with our new staff sergeant about that very issue, and he has told me they don't have the manpower to govern that area with police officers. And the only thing that is going to slow people down on that road is knowing they're going to get ticketed if a camera catches them, then so be it. There's curves in the road, there's hills, the sight lines are very poor through there. And there has been an accident in the past where kids have hit the bridge, and I don't know if one died, but they were severely injured a number of years ago. I have concerns with that road, and I really think it's one, pardon me, that needs the speed enforcement cameras. There is no alternative, in my opinion.
Counselor Cadeau.
I actually didn't have my hand up, Mayor, sorry.
Okay. Anyone else? I have a question that's a little bit different, but my question is about community safety zones and the ability to create those outside of schools. So at community centers, for example.
Yeah, to Mayor Shantz and the council, community safety zones, there is flexibility. Councils can implement community safety zones, community centers, retirement areas. Yeah, that's certainly in council's purview to do. We will be bringing a traffic and parking bylaw update on June 24th for council with a number of items in there. One of them is applying community safety zones to all of our school zones in anticipation of enforcement of some form, whether it be ASE or otherwise. And that's something that we can either take direction at that time, or if this council tonight wants to provide direction for any particular areas, we can certainly look to include that on that update as well.
Okay, thanks. And that would not have ASC, at least not at this point, but it would be double the fines if the police are doing enforcement.
That's correct.
Councillor Bryant.
Sorry, should we be deferring this then to the 24th with the report coming forward with Jared? I'm in council's hands. Jared.
Just for clarity, there is no reporting for ASC coming on the 24th, but there would just be a traffic and parking bylaw update, which would typically just include a quick memo. So there isn't really a report. It's just we're enacting changes to the traffic and parking bylaw. One of the changes being community safety zones, and we can certainly look to apply a community safety zone if council was wanting to do that on a specific area this evening in question. So if there was further discussion that council wanted on ASC, I would need to inquire with regional staff to look to see if I could gather any more information.
So what we've got here is dealing with speed, speed enforcement and ASE as opposed to the actual bylaws that you're going to bring in a couple weeks. Councillor Burgess.
You, Mayor Shantz, if I can just jump on the bylaw for a moment. With council's indulgence, I think Snyder Street would be one that could possibly look at a community safety zone. I know the residents there have often complained of that straight away. And then we also got the high school, John Hood at the end, the arena and pool and all that. So Director Poupe, I don't know if that's something we could look into or possibly add to the report there if council's inclined.
Really, that's more of a school zone than Arthur Street is because they're crossing back and forth. Yeah.
So my understanding is a community safety zone has less restrictions on where you apply it than a school zone. So a school zone would need egress, ingress, typically to identify it as a school zone. And if council will recall, in Snyder's Flats, we did reduce the speed limit, even though it didn't meet the definition of a school zone, but we felt it met the intent of a reduced speed limit. So if that is council's desire to have a community safety zone, we're intending to have a community safety zone around all of our school zones. And that's something that would be in council's purview too, that appreciating that that is a block, really. You have Second Arthur and the surrounding streets. So that's certainly something we could look to do a community safety zone around that area if that's council's wish.
I would go beyond the WMC
Okay.
to park. Yeah, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Just to follow up to the community safety zone, how would that work with when we're dealing with a regional road? So I'm thinking of St. John's Kilmarnock, with it being a regional road. How do we negotiate enforcement of that and implementing a community safety zone there?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Grant. So again, regional jurisdiction, but the region is intending to put community safety zones at every school zone that are part of ASE. So that would be caught up already.
I guess I'm just wondering, sorry, just if it was something like a community center on a regional road that we wanted to implement a community safety zone. I'm just trying to figure out how that would play out.
My understanding that would be regional council would make that decision.
Okay.
I don't know that township council would have the ability to make a community safety zone on a regional road in Woolwich. I think that would be a regional decision, but that's my understanding, but
Okay, I'm not
you
sure.
could advocate
I've
like.
heard some back and forth and maybe it's one of those somewhat gray areas.
Fair enough. I can find out from regional staff to see what they think that process is for them. Maybe that's a better answer.
Sure. Councillor Schwinn.
I want to follow up on that because a bigger issue, not just on speed zones. It's how we as a council or township influence regional decisions within our boundaries. I think we need a better method of communicating back and forth, be it lobbying, stating our position. So they've got not the education, but the information required to make better decisions. So it's not just school zones, it's lots of different things. And that's not something maybe we as a council need to think our staff could help us on a better mechanism.
Just to remind you of the wording on the motion as well is to advocate for staff and I guess for me and anyone else who wants to advocate for the principles, however we land on them tonight at the region as well. Councillor Bryant.
I fully endorse the advocating. I think that needs to happen.
Okay. So where are we landing here? We have 4 items in the motion regarding speed limits. I'm just trying to read them. Jeff, can you help me?
Through your Mayor Shantz, would you like me to put them up on the screen again?
Be great. Yes, please.
I guess from the perspective, when we deferred this, we haven't put a motion forward to vote for it. So we can still wordsmith without having a motion to.
Yeah.
Can we see that?
Yes, thank you. That's perfect.
So through you, Mayor Shantz, I highlighted 2 things that I heard were discussion points. Happy to do some wordsmithing here.
I would like to
Go ahead.
sorry, I would like to remove the between the months of September to June. I'm okay with keeping the hour to kind of acknowledge what Councillor Schwinn has been bringing up about buy-in from the residents. But I think Councillor Bryant brings up a good point that schools are in use, not just within school months.
So I'm not sure that we have consensus on these things. So Councillor Schwinn.
Yeah, I was struggling with that one. I'm trying to find a middle ground. And what I'm really struggling with is neither one is absolutely right. Because there are schools like St. John where, yeah, probably July is busy with the school. But guess what? There's a whole bunch of other parochial schools that you don't see a body in there from the 1st of June until the 1st of September. So why should it be one size fits all? Why can't we have some sort of a case-by-case basis based on activities at the school?
Councillor Bryant, Councillor Grant.
That's what I would suggest is leave it open because the minute you start confining it to everybody working within those hours, you're making it very difficult for everybody going forward. So right now you've got it very confined so that everybody falls within this parameter that you have there. So if you take the parameters out, then you deal with the schools on a 1-by-1 basis. I think that's what needs to happen.
But my experience has been nobody wants to pull those out. They want the most limited,
But
most control. That's past experience with all levels of government. That's been my,
you're dealing with regional roads. We have no control over those roads. That's one of the other problems we're dealing with. Within the township, we control those roads, but we don't control the regional roads. I think we have to be very careful what we do here.
So 1, 2, and 3 all deal just with regional roads.
Yeah.
4 is the only one that specifically talks.
Mhm.
No, they all deal just with regional roads.
Yeah,
Um,
I just don't want to see
So-
us tie our hands.
I would say too, from the perspective of appreciating what Councillor Swin is saying, I think one of the arguments could be made about consistency. So while yes, one school may not see a body in it between the months of June and September, consistency across the township will help with enforcement. I understand the argument for a case-by-case basis, but then that becomes confusing for residents as well, that I can drive this speed during these months in Elmira, but I can't do it in Breslau or Ward 3 or whatever.
Mr. Poupey, you wanted to
Thank
jump
you,
in?
Mayor Shantz. Exactly what I was going to say. It's consistency. It's for the consistent approach for enforcement. Consistency is key. And a school zone's a school zone. That's the way, and again, debate that rationale to Councillor Grant's point, but that's why it's proposed the way it is. And the last piece I just need to say is if number 1 stands with 60 kilometers, then no ASE will be, is what council is telling the region, that no ASE will be applied. They will not apply ASE at 60 kilometers an hour. So that just precludes ASE right away. We are out of the program at that with that speed limit stays.
Why?
60 kilometers an hour, and it's so I don't have the, again, I'm not the expert, but just 60 kilometers an hour will not stand as far as the ASE. I appreciate we did have that situation exist on Three Bridges Road, but there has been a change. I think 50 is enforceable under ASE, but it's 40 is obviously what regional staff are recommending. I believe they would apply ASE at 50 kilometers an hour, but I've been informed that not at 60. So that's something I can take away. But if the resolution stands with a hard 60, that's a risk that we run. So again, I would ask that we make this more generic we get more information back.
So that's a political decision?
That was a
Be-
staff decision. But
Okay, but it's not an equipment decision. Like, it's not the equipment decision. Yeah, we're getting there. It's not a restriction on the equipment itself.
no, I think it's a ASE sort of best practice. I'm not sure if there's a highway traffic. And again, I don't want to speak out of turn. I am not an expert in this. I'd need to get further information, but as it stands now, 60 would not, ASE would not apply to any road with a 60-kilometer speed limit at a school zone.
Councillor Bryant.
So a question for Jared. So if we have someone requesting a camera in a 60 zone, they wouldn't get it?
That's my understanding.
Can we try? Because this
I can certainly report back on that, but that's my understanding. The school zones are 40. We have a 50 on Three Bridges, so I want to be clear about that. And I was intending that would be ASE enforced. I've been informed that 60 is not going to be part of the program.
because St. John's is on a regional road, but it is a 60.
Currently, correct. But the intent is to reduce speed limits on regional roads from 60
To a 50?
or 40.
Okay, because I know that school, the kids have put a petition together asking for that, and that's why I was surprised when you said that.
I think I would bring that back at the council level.
Mhm.
That
That's concerning to me.
sounds. Anyway, I won't go there. But I think that's a good point, and I think that would need to be brought back, but for now, let's deal with this. Nathan, Councillor Cadeau.
I'm wrestling with this one. 1 and 3 are becoming more and more problematic only from what I'm hearing in limitations in legislation, being the Highway Traffic Act. It sounds like if we were to go ahead and give this advice, well, it doesn't sound like it. It does limit our ability to have ASE. And so that in itself is problematic. So I am buying into what I'm hearing about trying to make this more generic. Not really too keen on deferring this one though, because if we're giving staff direction to bring forward to region, we should have them engage in those conversations now, not wait until mid-June or later. So again, I agree with the intent. If we could operationalize it as written here, that would be fantastic. But what we're hearing is we can't. So how can we pivot?
So I guess I'm curious, why can we see flashing lights in every other county in Southern Ontario? Like I drive to Milverton, flashing lights on so 19 or 21, whatever it is, it's in place. So why is the region different? Other than I think there's a big push by regional staff to have ASE, and that's going to be our savior for speed enforcement. And I guess I'm firmly not on that page.
I think there's two uses for flashing lights. One is just to say, hey, you're going into a school zone, there's a change in speed. And the other was when I think the way it's worded in number 3 there is that the speed limit would only be reduced at a certain time and it would flash at that time. So I think it's two different uses of the flashing light that maybe we're talking about. Councillor Grant, then Councillor Cadeau, and then Mr. Poupé.
Thank you. I'm thinking then perhaps if we're looking at more of a generalized statement that we remove and the reduced speed limits apply on number 3 and just leave it as flashing lights should be installed to operate during school hours. I think from a behavioral standpoint, it would help drivers be aware that they're entering a school zone and they can react accordingly, or if they don't, that's another conversation. But I think it's beneficial to at least raise awareness for those drivers.
Councillor Cadeau.
Agree completely. I would take it even a step further and say that I know for my own driving behavior, not that I speed, but if I were to speed, the signs that actually tell you what speed you're driving at and that quite frankly yell at you when you're going too fast to slow down, they seem to have an impact on other drivers too.
I've heard that they they do that to other drivers. Mr. Poupé.
Just to further clarify the flashing beacon, it is simply there to draw attention, but never to convey the legal limit. That's, I think if we can separate that out, it's just there to draw attention. It does not convey what the legal posted speed limit is. And the challenge is, the argument is, and this is tested in court and why it's never relied on even by WRPS when they're enforcing, was it flashing, was it not flashing? So it's never there to indicate speed, just simply there to draw attention to whatever that may be.
So can we agree to take out between the months of September to June in number 1? Reluctantly. Sorry. Head nods would, or thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, yeah.
I'm still concerned with having any restrictions in there at all based on what Mr. Poupé has been telling us. I think we are tying our hands and making it very difficult.
Well, so you agree with taking out September to June?
yeah,
You just want more?
I would like
Okay.
7 to 7 gone as well.
Okay, let's just talk about September to June.
Oh, I was going to say from a maybe a suggestion for that, if we want to amend it further to generalize it, just leave it at should be reduced. But
To
regular,
60?
like, I don't even know if we need to say just the recommendation of that outside center boundaries should be reduced. Like, this may be too general for Councillor Schwint, but I'm just wondering if we just say speed limits in front of schools on regional roads outside of center boundaries should be reduced and just.
They're
Leave it at that.
already doing that.
I know it.
That was
I
the
don't want to
prob-
like neuter
that
it
was the
completely,
problem
but
we just ran into where they went 80, 60, 40, because
Yeah.
the region wants to go to 40. I shouldn't be debating.
Well, one suggestion that might get us out of this one is to state that they won't reduce speed limits in front of schools on regional roads outside of settlement boundaries will not be reduced below 50 kilometers per hour. Because that way we can have the 50 kilometers like on Three Bridges, we can still access ASC because it has the 50-kilometer minimum. But it doesn't limit our ability to implement ASE because we are limited to 60 kilometers.
But then we just had to fight on Lobsinger Line and Northfield Drive, whereas Region 140, we, the township residents pushed back really hard at regional council saying 40 is not gonna work, 60 does. We go to 50 in our resolution, I guarantee you it's gonna be 50, not 60. On these commuter roads, which are meant for moving people.
To that, I'll say you're right. And to that, we just saw the change on Three Bridges, which I didn't necessarily agree with, but kind of had a lukewarm agreement just because we heard from staff that the speed, limiting the speed can save lives. So we should do what we can. 10 kilometers, I think that we can say, yeah, it might be an inconvenience, but it's not really that earth shattering. The 40 can become quite frustrating because it's not just the slowing down, it's the aggressiveness of the drivers behind you that causes issues as well. So
70 to 50, 20 kilometers. I think awareness of the school zone was one of the selling features on that one. We're going from 80 down to 50, which will be the staff proposal. We can't kid ourselves there. And that doesn't make sense on Northfield or Lobsinger, etc. This is where I struggle.
Bonnie, Councillor Bryant.
I think my biggest thing is, this is about children. We need to protect those kids. People need to learn to slow down. And if that's what we have to do, then we have to put that into place. People cannot just keep driving like they're in a hurry to go everywhere. You've got to save the lives of these kids.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I think Councillor Cadeau's suggestion was the ideal for everyone. I think it maybe hits upon that like unhappy middle where it's a compromise where I don't necessarily want to say something that's too prescriptive that will lock us out of ASC because there may be instances that we want that in place. Fully acknowledging that Councillor Swint doesn't agree necessarily with the implementation of them, but I don't want to put us in a situation where we're just completely locked out. So I think by saying should not be reduced below 50 kilometers, that allows us to fight another day, so to speak, that if Lobsinger Line comes back and says we want to reduce it from 60 to 50, we can maybe have a different conversation then. But I think that might be our best path forward, to just provide staff with that generalized guidelines that we'd like them to go with, and not be too prescriptive. This is my thought.
So honestly, 50 or 60, I think, I mean, if they've got their mind set on 40, 50 is not going to make a difference. My concern, and I'm trying not to debate here, but another concern is that I don't see 80 to 50 anywhere else. I see 80 to 60 all over Southern Ontario. And so if you're talking about consistency, I think the 80 to 60 makes more sense, just in general. Yeah, up Victoria Street's got a couple spots, but they've got the flashing lights with the school hours on it.
I'm just thinking, like, there is my own commute to south end of the Guelph. There is one road that I can think of that does kind of go from it might be a 70 to a 50, but there is maybe other areas that and it's a city limit like implementation, but I appreciate, yeah, the point.
Okay. Garnering consensus is very difficult this evening. So maybe we're not going to do consensus. What?
Yeah, I was going to suggest at some point, if you want to get a motion on the floor and start amending it, we could start doing that if that would help council. I'm also happy to keep trying to work towards consensus and just making sure I have the language that council is asking for. Whatever is your will.
Councillor Grant.
Maybe do the easy thing and motion for support for 2, 3, and 4 as edited.
Okay,
And then we'll leave the big one for the next.
Can I just verify, Mayor Shantz, that it's as shown on your screen with
Yes,
the,
yeah,
yeah, okay.
which is 2 and 4 are the same, 3 just has that one line reduced.
rest piece.
The,
Okay,
and the reduced speed limits apply has been removed. Okay, that's out.
Okay. 2, 3, and 4 is there a seconder? Councillor Bryant, any further discussion on those 3? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, that's carried. So the question is so had feedback on the 80-60-40 and the 80, 80-60-40 basically. And that is what sort of spearheaded this particular number 1. What kind of direction do you want to give to the region on that? So we've had 50, we've had 60, we've had restrictions on times that I think we've kind of set aside. Is there a way to word this that gives direction and also leaves it open-ended for special circumstances? I don't know.
Could it be outside settlement boundaries should not be reduced below 50 kilometers per hour, but no greater than 60? Just give a range there. I'm just trying to straddle what we had, and I like Councillor Cadeau's suggestion.
I'm going to insert myself here, Mayor. I know that I had said that originally. I'm wondering if we can defer number 1 though, because I know that Director Poupée was going to go back to region to see whether or not ACE could be used at the 60 kilometer per hour. And I think that that's a key piece. If it can't, then we may need to make a different decision. But if it can, I am 100% for that 60 kilometers. But that piece is missing for me.
We just defer that section, that part.
Same motion.
You moving that?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Okay, discussion on the deferral.
Deliver the deferral. I'd like to add to Director Poupé's workload though, because why not? I want to understand what other municipalities within the region are doing on ACE, because I'm getting vibes that maybe Kitchener's not on board with it at all. I don't know what some other rural townships are doing. I'd like to understand region-wide what levels of buy-in there are. I think that's something this council and this township should know.
So I think just remind you that this is on regional roads. And so the Kitchener opting out is on Kitchener roads. They can't opt out on regional roads. And so I think there's no discretion to opt out on regional roads. I could be wrong. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Maybe just to save Mr. Poupée your workload, that could something be that Mayor Shantz discuss with her fellow councillors, the general vibes that she's getting from.
I can tell you what I've heard is I believe North Dumfries is going to do ASC with another provider is what I was told. And Kitchener, I think, is going to do their own. Mr. Poupée, do you have any intel?
No, I would need to, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz Council, I would need to gather some information on the Kitchener model. I'm not sure, actually, so I won't speak to that.
Okay. I can certainly ask. Yeah. So there's a motion on the floor to defer this part until we need a time and place till the next meeting. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. I do have one other item that we passed on the consent agenda. I just want to remind council that on there is the all council meeting on June 13th, and I called up the agenda. I think there's waste management, so the new garbage cans, that piece. I think there's something on tariffs and the airport, economic impact study findings on the airport. So that's at 2:30 on Friday, June 13th. No biking. Okay. Unfinished business, we have the 2024 year-end Q4 financial report. We deferred that at our last council meeting, and I will ask Director Lynn.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Shantz, just to remind council what we discussed a couple of weeks ago, I walked council through a number of financial indicators. And one of those indicators was the backlog in construction in progress / tangible capital assets. This was identified as kind of a high priority concern that should be addressed. The impacts would be on our financial statements. So it would increase our audit risk and our chances of not having a successful audit. And as well, it's reducing potentially our OCIF funding. So we're looking through that report for an upset limit to engage a consultant to start that work to address some of that TCA backlog. We put in an upper limit of 35,000. You may also recall that council asked staff to come back with other potential options rather than just a one-time kind of consultant fee. So there's another report, I believe, on the committee side or the council side, but there's another report coming, which is kind of related to this recommendation. But the Coles notes of it, rather than get into the other report, is staff still recommend that this 35,000 or the consultant still be retained, at least to do some of the initial work to get the framework to start addressing some of this backlog. If council wishes to endorse the other report and the recommendation in the other report, we probably would need less consultant dollars because the consultant would be able to start the work, and then this new position could kind of take over some of that work. So this recommendation here is still on the table, so to speak, still staff's recommendation. Either way, council decides, we would still need at least some consultant report, something like a Hemson, who you'll see coming in later to talk about our asset management plan. They already know about our assets, so they may be a good provider of some of those services. So that recommendation would still be staff's recommendation, but I can also speak to the later report about the additional financial support for the department.
Are there any questions?
Just to emphasize some of what Director Lynn has noted, the reason for the push for the timing is we want to make sure that there's no audit issues. And we recognize that we need to get that audit completed. We need to get on with some of this work. And normally with the recruitment process, it will take 3 to 4 months in terms of onboarding. And so that's a timing consideration as well.
No questions, Councillor Schwint?
Just a follow-up on reporting. We're expecting a report, I think, on the water, wastewater issues. Is that coming this month?
That's Jared's.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwint. So there'll be a verbal update on the June 24th meeting to council regarding the status of our investigations on the water and wastewater side.
Bonnie, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Would someone like to move the recommendation that's here? Councillor Burgess, seconder, Councillor Grant. Any further discussion? All those, yes. Yeah, that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, respecting the 2024 year-end Q4 financial report, approve the engagement of an external consultant to address the tangible capital asset accounting backlog with an upset limit of $35,000 to be funded from the operating contingency reserve.
So I'd struggle passing this motion until we've had a conversation with the next report. Because I think there could be some synergies in terms of that person we're hiring on. I'm sorry, I forget the title you're gonna give them.
Development financial analyst.
Development financial analyst. So I'd like to have that fleshed out together before we piecemeal it.
Yeah.
I just
Councillor Canuck.
want to say I tend to agree, but from a process perspective, Mr. Clerk, how would that work?
If anything, I would suggest that council bring the other report forward, if you want to approve this tonight. If you don't want to approve it tonight, and maybe Mr. Lynn can speak to timing on the hiring the consultant and getting the TCA work started. If you don't want to approve it tonight and you wanted to wait until June 24th, you could move both items to the committee, the whole portion of the agenda.
Mr. Lynn?
I was a little confused about the process too, because it's on a different side of the agenda, and then having that sober second thought. The consultant, the good thing that's to what CEO Brenneman said, the benefit of the consultant is the speed of which they can be engaged. They're already doing some of this work. It would take less time to bring them on, depending on the level of experience that we brought someone on. I can tell you, and I'm sure Hemson can speak to this, most of the work that the consultants are doing right now is dedicated almost exclusively to the asset management plan. So until July 1st, they have very little capacity to do any of this work anyway. So if this was delayed or deferred for 2 weeks, I don't think it would really impact us, because they probably wouldn't have the capacity to do this until July anyway.
Okay. So are you wishing to take this into the committee piece or bring the committee report up?
Sounds like staff are okay with bringing it into committee, so that's my preference.
Do I need a motion or just nodding of heads?
I think, Mayor Shantz, there's a motion. If Councillor Burgess and Councillor Grant were okay with doing that, then I think it'd be fine. If not, I think you do need a motion.
Yeah, fine. Okay. So Councillor Bryant, you'll remember that when we get to that part of the agenda. Okay. I don't know. We're hopping back and forth tonight. There is no other council business. We have a resolution for the bylaw listed on the agenda. A mover and a seconder to pass the bylaw. Moved by Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? That's carried. That concludes the council portion of the meeting. We'll take a quick 5-minute recess and we will start committee chaired by Councillor Bryant.
We'll be going live in 5 seconds.
Good evening. We're now meeting as Committee of the Whole for items that require more debate and discussion. We will not be making final decisions on these items, but proposing recommendations for the next council meeting. If anyone in the community has feedback on these recommendations, we encourage you to reach out to staff or submit comments to council before a final decision is made at the next meeting. So our first item of committee is regarding the asset management. I will call on Asset Management Coordinator Chelsea Raymond, Amanda Beattie, and Simon Lau of Aspire Consulting, and Christopher Bellette of Hemson Consulting to present the report. Thank you. Go ahead when you have a minute.
Hi, Council. I'll begin tonight. I'm pleased to bring forward the 2025 Asset Management Plan Addendum, which builds upon the 2024 Council-approved Asset Management Plan. The 2025 plan complies with Section 6 requirements of Ontario Regulation 58817, and approval is due on or before July 1st of 2025. As outlined in the recommendation in front of you tonight, the 2025 Asset Management Plan Addendum must be approved by a resolution passed by Council per the OREG. Moving forward, there's also an OREG requirement for Council to conduct an annual review of its asset management progress every year, starting in 2026. And a new asset management plan is to be prepared at least every 5 years, with the next update being no later than July 1st of 2030. So you can see with these milestones that asset management is not a one-time occurrence. Instead, it's a process that Council will continue to be involved in. Asset management is a constantly evolving and dynamic approach to that encourages a greater understanding of municipal assets and is an important high-level tool to be used in decision-making, like capital planning. You could think of it like an overarching umbrella that consolidates information from various sources to effectively manage infrastructure assets in alignment with strategic objectives. A good asset management approach is holistic and helps to move organizations away from reactive decision-making to a proactive approach that maximizes value at the lowest lifecycle cost. Tonight, we have Amanda and Simon from Aspire and Christopher from Hemson to present the plan. But just before they present, I just want to highlight a few quick points from the staff report. First, the township is just at the beginning of its asset management journey, and we've made great strides over the last 2 years to improve our understanding of our assets and develop frameworks that can be built upon in future updates. In some areas, we may not have the data maturity available for detailed analysis, but and where we're missing information, assumptions were made. Therefore, the plan in front of you was prepared using the best available data at this time. And as condition assessment information improves, the plan is going to change and will lead to better data-driven decisions. Second, as presented at the project update to Council in April, there is a funding gap that is identified over the 10 years as the financial strategy considers both the long-term planned lifecycle activities to meet level of service targets and growth from the DC study. So the plan therefore identifies the most cost-effective strategy to deliver services based on current understanding of community expectations, forecasted performance, and available funding. Lastly, the plan and the approval of it is not the budget or a commitment to a funding strategy. Instead, these items should be contemplated during budget deliberations and further detailed service delivery reviews. With that, I'll turn it over to Simon and the team to kind of provide a more detailed overview of the final plan.
Thank you. So yeah, appreciate everyone's time this evening. Walk you through the asset management plan for itself. Wanted to bring back, as what Chelsea said, this is a journey that's been begun in 2019, where every municipality was preparing that asset management plan itself. 2022, the resolution passing the municipal infrastructure assets was adopted. On the core side, last year in 2024, the non-core, all other municipal infrastructure assets were included in the plan. And that inventory itself within the township, $1.2 billion worth of assets or replacement cost at the time, comprising in the areas of transportation, environmental services, utilities, emergency services, recreations and facilities as well. In this year, in the 2025, the addendum on the asset management plan brings forward a number of new areas, looking at, as what Chelsea had mentioned, proposed levels of services, defining life cycle strategies, involving the community engagement in determining the levels of service that are desired, and then looking at a financial strategy to meet some of the gaps related to both the levels of services as well as the growth that's forecasted in. So levels of service itself, really what we're after at this point is to ensure that services are delivered efficiently while meeting the regulatory requirements, public expectations, financial constraints. And in the past, some metrics sometimes were derived based off of feedback received from public, feedback from the team itself. And through the asset management plan this year in the development, the township worked with the team, looking at subject matter experts, the members of the departments, working through them and developed a number of performance metrics to be able to measure and perform against over time. So looking at 23 different technical levels and 62 additional customer technical metrics. Some of these include ones that you're familiar with: bridge condition, road conditions, response times, natural gas consumptions, things that are very tangible and measurable. And what we had worked through in it is developing the proposed levels of measures. So knowing what we know as the current, where do we want to get to over the next 10 years? What does that mean? So looking at the industry data across what are the practices, what are the considerations, what does the staff want, engaging the community through the surveys that were done earlier, where we used the Engage WR platform between December and January to get feedback from the residents as to where they would like the service levels to go. We recognize that, through that time, we did get a number of surveys responded. It was a period over the holiday. There was survey fatigue, but we were able to take that feedback and use that into developing what was the proposed levels of service. And that obviously feedback will continue as more responses come in, other surveys are completed, other work is done in the township as the data grows and continues, and the feedback is fed back into the plan itself. And then the next piece within that is, once we've established what the performance is, what are those costs related to performing those activities? What does it mean when you increase the level of service? What does it mean if you decrease it? What is the impact? And that leads to defining the target. And then obviously with each change, there's a consequence, whether it's financial, a result of a delay, a service unavailability, looking at that and building that out into the 2025 addendum and looking at what does the financial analysis say to achieve the targets that are required or to get to where we want to be. A typical asset goes through kind of a different series of stages in its life cycle. You have the initiation of the want or the desire to build and construct the asset. You enter the phase of where you're operating and maintaining it. You then move into a period where you will do some rehabilitation. Eventually, you'll have some growth perhaps with it, and then eventually you'll retire the asset itself. In each of these phases of its life, there's different steps that can go through from a strategy to determine how do we best maintain the asset life itself. So in the activity, we looked at what are the influencing factors related to that? What are the typical industry practices that go towards those? What are the cost benefit analysis or cost benefits of taking on some of these actions? And what does that actually mean? How does your service get impacted by the choices that are made within these strategies? When we look at a various service, so on the image to the right, you can have a very common life cycle expectation. You can start off with, an asset performs very well. If you do nothing, it will rapidly decline in its life and turn into a poor performance. You can choose to take certain initiatives, rehabilitation activities that help balance the timing, the cost, and the performance of the asset itself. There are various strategies, depending on your asset, that you can introduce significant major treatments or multiple minor treatments. Asset management itself is to look at optimizing that approach. What is the best, lowest cost activity that's going to give you the longest life out of it? You want to look beyond just the design life itself and see what you can do to stretch, basically giving you the greatest return possible, give you the longest life in the asset itself. The purpose of this is what we want to achieve is kind of not do the minimum, but find that sweet spot, trust the data, look at the historical information, minimize your risk of the work, and extend that life you can get to minimize service disruptions. Finding that optimal cost itself becomes what we go through in the modeling. Now, also, as Chelsea had mentioned, the maturity of our data obviously plays a big factor. You don't know what you don't know. In the stuff that you do know, the more you get better at it, the more data you have, the ability to improve your asset management plan, what your strategies will be, the activities that you want to take on. So we prepared a maturity assessment that helped analyze whether or not we're meeting the current levels of service, how complete is the data that we have, what's the condition of the data itself, what's the average performance, and what the maturity of the lifecycle strategies that are being employed. So by understanding the gaps here, where you are, where you want to get to, is another opportunity to help define the work that has to be done to improve your plan as that continuous improvement goes on. It also allows us to see what effort is required to help identify spots of higher areas of interest to focus on. And when we put all those together, we had developed the strategy, or the financial strategy that puts the requirements, the needs, and all of it together into the financial roadmap. And I'll pass that over to Chris here to talk a little bit about that lifecycle need itself.
Sounds good. Thank you, Simon. So getting right into the financials, one of the key things that we want to do is first establish the total capital related lifecycle cost needs over the next 10-year period. What you see there is an outline or a summary of what that looks like. On the left, for the tax funded services, we start off with those services. So those are your services except for water and wastewater services, a total of about $158.6 million over the 10-year period. That's made up of a few key components, made up of your tax-funded services capital program, as well as the benefit to existing shares from your development charges background study, all reflective of the work needed to maintain assets in state of good repair that's been identified through your various publicly available information sources. In addition to that, we have additional costs, including the additional costs from the roads needs study. Your roads needs study identifies costs to meet the level of service objectives. That's been added in on top of the initial capital program and BTEs, as well as the incremental costs to meet proposed level of service as analyzed through the asset management plan document related to the condition performance of the asset infrastructure. The final component is a cumulative provision for expansion. When we look at asset management, we want to make sure that we're accounting for the long-term life cycle needs of all infrastructure, including your growth-related infrastructure. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're accounting for the long-term repair or replacement of that infrastructure above and beyond its initial acquisition. So you can see that there's a few data sources that come into this. Staff have done an excellent job in helping us understand those data sources with the best available information on hand. For the water and wastewater services, same approach, about a total of $46.1 million over that 10-year period. Financials in terms of understanding the actual impact to the township. What we have presented here is a set of key scenarios that outline what those requirements are. So funding the $158.6 million in total life cycle costs would require, and I guess I should point out that we have in sort of the revenue side, we have accounted for all funding sources available to the township. That includes grants from gas tax, that includes your OCIF, and that includes your base contributions to reserves already included in your existing budget. So it includes all the good work that the township has already done and all the revenue sources that the township has available. However, there is a gap in order to close that $158.6 million. In order to do that, from your 2.5 infrastructure levy that you currently have in place, that infrastructure levy would need to increase by about 5.9% to 8.4% every year over the next 10-year period. That will enable the township to meet the proposed level of service and meet the $158.6 million need. There's a set of scenarios that are also provided for council's consideration that are based on information from previous asset management plans as well. The first scenario is a scenario that proposes a 6% infrastructure levy. That would be 3.5% more than your current 2.5%. That would get you to a total of about $129.4 million in funding, with a gap still remaining of $29.2 million by the end of the 10-year period. Strategy 2 proposes a 4.3% infrastructure levy. That's 1.8% more than sort of your current infrastructure levy. That levy or that scenario is tied to your 2014 asset management plan and what the recommendation was from that document back when that was developed in 2014. And then your current state, which is your 2.5% infrastructure levy, so holding the line and including that 2.5% infrastructure levy going forward over the 10-year period would still leave a gap over that time period of about $64.8 million. So you can see that the needs are significant, and there's a need for additional funding that's required in order to meet those proposed levels of service. For the rate-funded assets, a similar sort of approach in assessing the revenue versus the needs. The needs of $46.1 million are measured against a $22.6 million in revenues that are available over the 10-year period built into the existing budget and assumptions on grants. That leaves a funding gap of about $23.6 million. However, unlike the tax-funded services, which are really where the need really lies, the rate-funded services would require a 4.5% utility levy or rate increase combined for water and wastewater every year over the 10-year period, and that's only associated to capital works. So just keep in mind that doesn't include your operating needs for water and wastewater and inflationary adjustments and so on. That would be for capital needs alone. However, unlike the tax-funded side, continuing your rate increases in line with your rate study would allow you to meet the proposed level of service. So just making sure that those rate study recommendations are being implemented would allow the township to meet the proposed level of service over that 10-year period. With that, I'll hand it back to Simon to conclude.
So the gap mentioned obviously is a snapshot in time, and it's based on considerations that data that's available to us, and considerations need to be made to help address the gap itself. And some of that articulated in this particular slide here. First and foremost, improve data quality. The model and the work done is based on the information provided. As that data improves through additional work that the township takes on, the model will be able to be changed, reflected, and the data, the outcome will be different. No different than levels of services. These are established based on feedback from the township itself, as well as the community, adjusting the levels of services, the measures, the requirements, what it's looking for, gives you an opportunity to adjust what the gap is. There is also risk tolerance levels. So by not doing certain amount of works, there is an outcome that can go on in terms of the degradation of certain facilities, whether or not there's a tolerance for that, what the risk appetite is with that, and what the consequences would be, as well as what the outcome is by deferring some of the work. There's obviously, as we had discussed, seeking funding from upper levels of government. Obviously, that is an activity that will continue to go forward, and that's been going on. Whether or not additional opportunities come up, certainly wants to look for to help close the gap. One that was discussed is service-specific levies. So addressing specific areas within the gap itself, targeting critical services, such as, say, stormwater, having a levy dedicated towards that, and targeting the funding specifically to activities related to those itself. Increase user fees, aligning the costs of the service to what the fees are to help run the services themselves can be a consideration. And then on the lower three, integrating things together. So an integrated financial plan where activities such as this with the asset management plan, capital planning, financial budgeting itself, bringing those processes together into a single outflow will help improve kind of the idea of what the efficiencies may be and how that total gap can be addressed. Working towards a dedicated reserve fund, as that's already been going on in terms of making the levy, continuing that, building that base amount of funding that's available. And the last one is utilizing debt as an option to help close the gap. Further to that, there's obviously opportunities for continuous improvement in terms of being able to improve both the asset management plan, how the assets are run, maintained, and continued. So we can look at optimization, so data-driven optimization, always a big part, as I had mentioned, leveraging the data that's available, using condition assessments to drive the programs and the capital planning, revising the proposed levels of services to understand what the needs are, obviously continuous reviews of the asset management plans and the strategies and the frameworks, and continuing the engagement of the community to understand what the needs are and reflecting that accordingly within the plan itself. Operational efficiencies in the sense of how do we manage and maintain the assets themselves, using maintenance management systems as a tool, developing processes to streamline our work and our efficiency, how we get that done, integrating the work data that comes out of it with our asset data itself so that they become part and parcel together on how they can be used, taking advantage of technology enhancements. So using the the modeling tools that are available for decision supports, continue to use GIS and integrating that into databases so that the asset information is available at our fingertips. Driving through life cycle costs, looking at the service delivery reviews, enhancing preventative maintenance programs, looking at our strategies, and then finally with sustainability itself, building in risk adaptation plans, continuing with staff training to make sure that we continue to move asset management forward, and then integrating the plan itself, as I mentioned before, with capital planning itself. And with that, I'll wrap it up. So thank you for your time and open the floor to any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the delegates? No questions? Thank you. Jared, do you have any comments?
Through Chair Bryant to Council, I just first off want to acknowledge Chelsea's work, Aspire's work, Hampson's work in this task. I think they did yeoman's work in getting us here. Been around the township for 13 years, and we have really languished in our asset management process. And I think credit goes to all the work that they've done. It's an incredible undertaking. I don't think council can appreciate the amount of effort and time that's invested. This transcends all departments in various forms. Everyone's involved. And it truly is the most efficient way to manage assets. Like, this is something that we really need to swallow hook, line, and sinker, because it is the most efficient use of dollars. The OREG speaks specifically to spending the least amount to maximize useful life. And this is a journey. And I think I just reiterate that we are in the infancy stages of this journey. It's legislated, thankfully, because if it wasn't, we probably wouldn't get the resourcing to be able to do it. And we're going to continue to ask for that. And this is a plan that is going to require investment. This is not something that we just check a box in and park. This is something that needs to continue to show up. And I think that was the message tonight. I want to hit that point home very clearly, as we've identified information and it's the best available. And is it the best information? No. I think that's important too. It's just the best that we've been able to come up with right now. And more work needs to be in this to refine the plan. So this is certainly something we all need to wrestle with at budget. This will be something that you will continue to hear about from all departments. So again, I just want to thank them for the work that they've done. It's an important piece. This is the final piece on our legislated obligations to meet timelines. And, we've struggled with that timeline in the past for some who've been around. We've had a hard time meeting some of those requirements. So here we're at a good time. We have committee meeting here. If there was some debate or discussion or anything, we have that ability to pass that on the 24th of this month and still be in compliance with the regulation. And obviously, we're required to come back and review as a report card to council annually with a 5-year plan. So I think just like to reiterate.
Councillor Cadeau?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenters, you had mentioned that one source of potential financing would be debt financing. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that and what the potential benefits versus the potential drawbacks might be to that.
Through the chair, I can address that question. Yeah, so in terms of the use of debt financing as a tool is useful for making sure that if there's a particular project of importance for the township and for council, that it can be undertaken based on the timing that's needed. So debt financing would allow you to undertake that work when it's needed and paying off that work over a longer time period. One important thing, an advantage when you debt finance, particularly large infrastructure that has a wide-ranging benefit to residents, is that those payments and those costs can be funded over a longer time period and from different generations who benefit from that infrastructure. One downside or a particularly important downside of debt financing is recognizing that the township needs to be cognizant of the provincial limit of 25% of own source revenue. So as you undertake debt financing for particular projects, it's important that the township monitor what those debt levels are relative to that particular limit. Very few municipalities are up against that limit. Many municipalities are relatively low, but it's something that would need to be monitored as you undertake debt financing going forward.
Thank you for that. And this is more a comment for council's consideration. I mean, having to increase over 8% year over year for the next 10 years is going to be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of residents when it only relates to things like our assets. So I think that it's on us to really consider what options we have available to us for financing. Throwing that out there.
Just to add to the conversation through you, Chair Bryant, just to add on to what Christopher said about debt financing, not to try to muddy the waters here, but he mentioned the initial install for some of the assets. So 36% of this asset management plan is related to the DC study. So that assumes that we have the capacity or the funding already in place to put a lot of those growth related infrastructure in. So this is just existing assets and the renewal of those assets. It's not the initial upfront funding for some of these growth related assets. So even if we fully funded this asset management plan using, say, that full debt capacity, we would still need significant debt capacity or front ending or cash flow requirements to do the initial install for some of that growth related infrastructure. So the asset management plan doesn't really look at the cash flow. It's really just assuming that we have all of these things and we're going to have funding constraints. But those are the kinds of things, that integrated financial plan, that we would have to look at as part of the budget process and an overall kind of financial strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Mr. Poupé?
I think the important piece too, it hasn't been discussed, so I think I'll bring it up. There is the increase that we saw in the gap, but I think the other part to consider for council is the service delivery. So we've made assumptions on proposed levels of service in particular. We think we've generally hit what our existing levels of services are, but are they appropriate? I think that is part of the next journey for us, is that if we're going to continue on what our existing levels of service and what we deem to be our proposed level of service, that's the gap, right? So is that the gap? Are those appropriate levels of service? And I think that's the whole wrestle. You're correct, we fund the plan, but we still haven't really reviewed risk and proposed level of service in any great degree. And I think that's really what we need to do year over year over year. Is that an appropriate level of service? Are there things we could do? And a very simple example would be, do we need to spend, $2.5 million to rehabilitate Bridge X? Is that important? Are there other access points? Just a very simple analogy there. Is that really the best use of the dollar? Because there's only $1 and we have lots of needs. So I think that's part of the decision-making by council during budgets, is there's the tax increase or levy increase or new levies or new investments, but there's also the decision on what is appropriate to rehabilitate or where to put that money. So I would just like to leave with that, if I could.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? No, seeing none. Before you, you have a recommendation. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Grant, seconder. Councillor Cadeau, any further questions? None, then I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And that would be carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Elmira Mini Rescue Fire Apparatus Award. So we'll call on Fire Chief Dennis Aldous to present his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you have a report on purchasing the Elmira Mini Rescue Fire Apparatus. The approved purchase is a new CAMI Mini Rescue for the Elmira Fire Station at a cost of $579,279.71 plus applicable taxes from the Met's Fire and Rescue, with delivery in late 26, which could even turn into 2027. It all depends on the delivery of the chassis. And that's kind of where it's a wild card at this moment. The last time we brought a truck forward, council had wanted us to make sure that we could give them enough time to do proper consulting in decision making, and we have done that. But to give you a little background on how I came up with this whole thing, because you're probably wondering why I chose KME, which is a US manufactured truck. So there are 6 major fire truck manufacturers in Canada. I stuck with the major ones because we've dealt with a small one before, and unfortunately, we ended up having to figure out how to get all the parts back and everything that they'd made up because that company went bankrupt. So I'm just sticking with the major ones right now. So there's one in each of the following 4 provinces. There's one in BC, one in Manitoba, one in Ontario, and one in Quebec, and there's 2 in New Brunswick. With over 3,200 fire departments in Canada, with 437 of those are in Ontario alone. This makes the ability to get Canadian trucks hard, and any warranty work would need to be completed at a distance. So anything out in Manitoba, we have to get the truck there and back. The Ontario company is close proximity to the GTA, and they are seeing more activity from that area. So when someone like City of Toronto says they're only going to buy fire trucks from Canada, it kind of limits where we can get them from. So currently Met shares an office in St. Jacobs with a company that does all their warranty work for them and the final truck alterations. So when we spec out a truck, there's shelves, bins, everything that's in there, but all that doesn't get manufactured, doesn't get made and installed until it's back at their facility here in St. Jacobs. And unless a manufacturer makes their own chassis, they all come out of the US. And if they make theirs, they're buying the motor, transmission, and numerous other components from the US. So approximately 75% of the truck comes out of the US. And I think with dealing with a local dealer with ties to the township made good sense. I can answer any questions that you wish to have.
Thank you. Any questions from council? No? Councillor Cadeau?
Just have to form it in my head before I spit it out so it doesn't sound like jumbledness. First of all, I want to commend the chief on bringing a report forward that's over $100,000 less than the budget. Quite frankly, I want to throw my elbows up like everybody else, but when it comes to an expense this high, I'm more than willing to buy it from wherever we can to get the best value for taxpayers. So I just want to note that it's appreciated that you were able to find a truck at a much lower cost.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Seeing none, you have a recommendation before you. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, any more questions? No? Then I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? And that would be carried. Thank you, Dennis. Next on the list, we have the quarterly report. Are we moving forward with this, Jeff, or is there a, go ahead? Okay. Okay, next up is the 2025 quarterly report, first quarter, and I'll call on Director Lynn to present it.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Bryant. So last couple weeks, I presented the Q4 2024 report. This is the first quarter 2025 report, so the first report showing the financial progress of 2025. Normally, during this time of year, there isn't really much to report because it's so early in the year. The first quarter tends to be March. We pass the budget in February or so, so usually there isn't a lot really to report on the first quarter. And that is the case for the capital program. For the capital program, we're just getting started. There's not a lot of movement really, so there's no real story to tell on the capital side. The only piece really, and I do mention this in the report, is we don't, again, this is part of the changes that we need to make for budgeting. We don't really have good reporting on multi-year projects. So some projects may have started last year and are continuing this year, but the way we budget a brand new budget this year. So it's very hard to understand the life to date for those multi-year projects and see where it compares to the overall project budget. So that's something we're going to be looking at changing in future years. So there's not much really to say other than that on the capital program because it is a brand new capital budget. On the operating side, there is a larger story. Again, in most departments, there really isn't enough time elapsed to draw kind of realistic projections where we're going to end throughout the year because we just finished the budget. The one exception, though, is winter control. So the winter control budget year to date as of March was $309,000 over budget. So the total budget for winter control was $1.1 million roughly. We've spent over $1.4 million year to date as of March. And just to give council some perspective, the 2024 year to date actual was $661,000. So $1.4 million compared to $661,000 last year is roughly a $750,000 to $800,000 increase in spending on the winter control side. So one thing is that doesn't include all of the April invoices. So some of the April invoices would have been related to work in March, because even if we plow, say in March 30th, we'll still get invoices, or March 15th. So that number has been increasing. So we're well over the budget, and council will probably aware, November and December are another winter months, heavy. We don't know exactly what the winter will bring, but we know we're already over budget. And so we're projecting potentially a $600,000 overage by this time, by the end of the year, knowing that we have additional expenses still to come. There are a number of different funding sources available. Director Poupé can talk about the service level that we're providing for winter control. There's a number of contingency reserves, but one thing I do want to point out to council is many other municipalities are experiencing a very similar winter. We all kind of went through the very rough winter. And one thing that's best practice is to establish a winter control reserve where any surpluses would be put in. Usually it's a percentage of the overall budget. 10 to 20% is usually a good guideline. So if there are these one-off overages, there's more flexibility and more adaptability to absorb some of these overages. Unfortunately, we have something like $20,000 in our winter control reserve, and it hasn't changed as far back as I could go, 6 to 10 years. We've never really put any money towards that winter control contingency reserve. So any overages here, we would just have to absorb in either the operating contingency in other operating programs or through the capital budget. So that's the main takeaway. There's also some progress on our strategic plan initiatives, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or for any of the rest of the departments.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions? Councillor Cadell.
$600,000 over budget is a lot. Is that simply related to the weather, or can we point to any other reasons why that's significantly over?
Through you, Chair, Brian, to Councillor Cadeau, apologies. So yeah, this is absolutely related to level or weather and levels of service that the township provides. I think it's no secret that the township does provide a high level of service. We exceed minimum maintenance standards, as most municipalities do in the region of Waterloo. We attend every street and weather event. That's something that obviously is part of this process we're looking at, and potentially looking to alter that. We would certainly need council's endorsement and support if we were to alter those levels of service. We would see there wouldn't be risk, but I think there would be obviously some important communications that would have to be provided to customers of Woolwich, because that would be a noticeable difference. It'd likely translate into class 5 and 6 roadways not seeing plows on every event. Maybe it could be a month, depending on how that weather is, and you would be basing things on accumulation of snowfall on roadways before providing service. So it's something certainly worth exploring. I think the other opportunities are at hourly averages of time spent in winter control, and then applying that to today's dollars and determining what would be an appropriate funding level. And the idea then would be providing a sustainable funding. And obviously in years where we didn't need to do that, you were banking money, and then years such as this, you would be pulling out of reserves. I think municipalities across Ontario would have been dipping into reserves. The unfortunate reality for Woolwich is there are not reserves available. And I think the reason inherently why winter control reserve hasn't seen anything change since 20,000 is because we've been dipping into the contingency operating reserve for various other items. So there's been a lot of competing interests, and that's generally a challenge that we've been facing, and that's the reality we're into. But I think all those pieces we are going to bring forward at budget time for 2026 deliberations.
Any other questions, Council? Councillor Schwinn?
I touched on this earlier, but the water and wastewater comments have me a little bit concerned. Looking at $210,000 deficit in Q1 compared to the $900,000 deficit last year. So to me, that's a marginal improvement maybe. I know we're getting a verbal report a couple weeks on this, but that's 6 months into the year. I'm a little bit concerned. Are we adjusting this hard enough and fast enough? And do we have some assurances that we are achieving savings in Q2 that are going to show up in Q2, 3, 4? Or is this deficit next Christmas going to be $600,000-$700,000 still, and we're going to be scrambling?
Yeah, through you, Chair Bryant, to Councillor Schmidt. I think the problem is we haven't found a smoking gun. There is a whole lot of pieces. We're finding a whole lot of things that are going to add up to an amount, but we are not finding a $500,000 problem that we can point to. So what that is indicating is there is a whole lot of work still to do, and we still are dealing with resources. And that's why, so it's not like there isn't work going on behind the scenes. We've contracted services to work on this dedicated. We are still running into staff challenges, obviously, with some staff now being away that are important pieces to this. So there's some, unfortunate events that are occurring too. But that, again, I want council to understand the needle is moving in the right direction, but there is not one thing that we are able to find to say this is the problem. So we have things we can address at budget time. I think there's wholesale rate charges, things we're looking at now. We've been doing our I&I study in Elmira, as council was aware. We just did a whole bunch of smoke testing. We got a meeting tomorrow to unpack some of the findings. And again, there wasn't a smoking gun there. Now we're looking at getting into expensive lateral investigations to determine inflow problems. So we didn't see necessarily a lot of easy connection pieces that we could point to, and now we're further down the road. So unfortunately, we're looking at further investigating and spending additional dollars to try to find a problem. But it's not that we are not doing anything. I think that's we were hopeful to find a big problem. Go, that's what it is. Easy peasy, we found it, or a lost bill. But billings, we're doing that. We're finding some pieces there too. We're finding some pieces in the system. But I suspect it's all going to add up to a change for the good. But we haven't been able to compile all the data yet.
So I think what I'm hearing is we're finding issues. I'm not saying you're not doing work or good things happening, but we're not seeing a meaningful financial savings month over month. They're going to make this decrease, even if it's $10,000 at a time. I'm hearing we're still looking for more problems and we haven't addressed problems.
Maybe I can just add to Director Poupé's comments. So this is the March 31st financial statements. So we still run, we've also run April statements. They're not in front of council now. We haven't run the May statements yet, but I have seen improvements in this variance because you're going to add budget and the variance has gone down. The deficit has gone down. And I think that's a result of the increase in the rate revenue, the charges that we did. So the rate revenue took effect March 1st. So they wouldn't be reflected necessarily in January, February, but they would be taking some effect in March and then some effect in April. So I don't often say this, but I'm cautiously optimistic. At least there will be some improvement. I don't think we'll be at the same level as we were last year. I still think there's a problem, as Director Poupé mentioned. There's still other issues that need to be addressed, but I do think the work that we did increasing the revenue and the rates will help this deficit, and we will be seeing improvements in Q2. So I wouldn't take this and multiply it by 4. I think it's improving already from what I've seen for April.
Any other questions, council? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to council. I want to emphasize one very important discussion I think council needs to have tonight, and it's regarding the potential options for mitigation of the winter control situation. Why that's important is I think staff needs some direction for council with respect to what level of appetite, quite frankly, you have with respect to the options that can be explored. The reasons and rationale for that is because if we don't look to start now mitigating, then under the very worst case scenario, and you let the year play out and no changes are made or no contingency plans are put into place, is ultimately you end the year with a significant deficit, and then we start in the hole, pardon the expression, for the 2026 budget process, right? That's the way that the normal system works. So to that end, I want to reiterate the options that council has heard tonight, which is it's conceivable, it's not unheard of. I've been around the council room long enough that other council members have in the past said, can we look at our level of service standard? And again, that would help to maybe not so much mitigate the deficit we've experienced as much as mitigate whatever the start of winter control would look like for the upcoming season. However, it certainly would be a change going forward. However, to that end, I'm sure council wants to understand what that looks like in terms of, right now, very quick response in terms of standard, how quickly roads are all plowed, whereas this would move to a system whereby, certainly the main roads would be plowed quickly and on a routine basis, but some of the roads would not be plowed until a certain level of snow accumulation had occurred. So as Director Poupée had noted earlier, council may or may not have an appetite to review our standard of service and what we look at there. Outside of that, it's also been noted that there have been savings over the course of this year. We've been having really good tendered prices. However, also there's pros and cons with using capital dollars, especially capital dollars that, we may be saving that we've been putting back into infrastructure reserve fund, to be able to offset an operating situation. Not always necessarily a best practice. However, our job is to show you all of the different options. Outside of that, there would be opportunities to explore the operating contingency. However, again, that is getting low as well. That being said, outside of that, there could be smaller amounts of money. The general rule often in these situations, from my experience, is, you start, are there any options within the department? You go beyond that, you look right across all of the departments, and are there any projects that can be deferred, delayed, et cetera, again, that would experience levy dollars. However, we are dealing with a sizable amount of money here. And, as Director Lynn has noted, most municipalities that experience this, again, with the depth of reserves, would say the natural is that's what you have an operating contingency for abnormal winters that you have. But I think it's very important for this council to understand that some level of thought and direction should be provided to staff back to us so that, right now we can start to look at options that are palatable in your mind with respect to mitigating this. So as I said, so we don't start the next budget season in a significant hole situation.
Councillor Cadeau?
Through you, Chair, I just thank David for those words. It kind of spawned a question in my mind for Director Poupée, though. If we were to limit snow clearing, is that going to improve or make worse wear and tear on the roads? I'm just thinking plows aren't necessarily the easiest thing on our roads. Would it be more would it be better to have the snowpacked roads for longevity?
Yeah, through Chair Bryant to Councillor Coteau, it's a good question. Obviously, less use is going to have I'd say, an improved impact, right? You're right, plows do damage roads, there's no question about it. I think the real challenge we've had in the region in general, and I think likely all of us who we're over 50 could remember driving on roads where you didn't see asphalt, right? So it wasn't uncommon to drive on snowpack. Certainly up in the northern area and Owen Sound area, it's, you know, more sand and so forth, weather conditions. So it's the problem is we kind of created a standard too, and then there would be a decoupling of that standard and a change of driver behavior. Technology hasn't helped us, right? People drive now with anti-lock brakes and the snow tires, and they feel like they can drive like it's summer conditions. So there's a whole lot at play. I think the real problem will be messaging and then getting feedback. And it may be wise to test that water if that's something we're going to explore. I don't know, and I should find this out, but I do believe that what we do exceeds some of what the larger cities do. So we would be more in line with them, certainly on a cul-de-sac. If anybody lives on one in Cambridge, Kitchener, or Waterloo, I suspect you don't see a plow every winter event. So they're probably more in line with minimum standards, minimum maintenance standards than we are. We probably exceed them more than they do. So yes, there would be a bit of, but is it calculable? Probably not, right? Just, I think just inherently you would see less damage and obviously your equipment would be used less, but that can have pros and cons to it too.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you. I don't think this necessarily needs to be a conversation tonight, but maybe later in the year into the fall, but have council come together and look at our level of services and maybe have staff identify a couple areas that might be fruitful discussion for us to, as we head into the 2026 budget, have an idea of what we would like to do in the coming year, whether that's reducing snow clearing or our RCS programs or whatever it may be. I think it would be beneficial prior to that budget discussion about a reduction in services, if that's an appetite we have, and if so, where.
Thank you. I have one question for you. Just if we reduce our service levels, are we looking at liability in any way?
It's a litigious world. There's always liability in everything we do, but there's important pieces that we can follow to mitigate that. And one of those pieces would be for a standard operating procedure to be endorsed by council and ensuring that we comply still with minimum maintenance standards. So from that perspective, there's no inherent risk or increased risk, we'll say, than we would have today.
Thank you. Councillor, any other questions? Councillor Schwint?
I think we maybe do need to flesh this out before budget season for the reasons David indicated, but I need orders of magnitude. So if we reduce levels of service on not every winter event, are we out on the cul-de-sacs? Are we saving $10,000 or are we going to save $100,000? To put that in context, what we as a council can live with and residents support.
Yeah, I appreciate that direction, Bryant, to Councillor Schwint, that certainly what we'll do is we can start putting together, and again, I think we want to look at, winter is winter, right? It's variable. So what we would do is try to go back and look at hourly investment, I would say, over the past number of winters, come up with a bit of an average. I think that's appropriate. We are advocating, though, to maintain current levies, right? We're not advocating to reduce that. I think from that perspective, to look to build up a reserve, but then counter that with a reduction in service to help build up the reserve. So I think that's what staff are asking. I just wanted to see if that was what council's understanding is.
Council, any comments? No. We're gonna leave it as food for thought. Councillor Cadeau?
It's a tough question to answer without putting more thought into it, to be quite frank. That's a tough question. Yeah.
Could we work on that premise and then council can debate that when they see the information? Is that a fair? Okay.
Nodding of heads, yes. Yeah, I think so. David?
Yeah, just further to Councillor Grant's comment about the timing of providing information. I would just reiterate from my vantage point that senior management has to continue right now to look at what our options would be to mitigate, because the longer we wait out the year, the less opportunities we will have to look at changes in programming hours, looking at changes in deferral of projects or whatever the case may be. Because like I said, the longer the year goes out, the less likelihood we're able to shift. So, I mean, that's our job normally to do anyways, even in the absence of direction, is to make sure that at the very least, we're starting to look at ways in which to mitigate the winter control situation. And again, understanding tonight, we wanted to say the worst case is using the operating contingency. The only drawback with that is, again, the status, as you know, of our reserve and reserve funds. However, I think part of the direction tonight is, outside of winter control, does council also have an appetite to look at, other potential departmental type level changes that we would normally explore with respect to, changes in swimming hours or certain other deferral of projects and things of that nature. Again, it's what appetite that you have at what level to explore that. But the timing is critical, because the longer the year, the less the opportunity.
So I'm going to put a question to council first. Do we want to have a discussion on, we've got, June 24th and July 22nd, I believe, was the other date for council meetings. Do we want to put that discussion to either one of those dates? Councilor Schwinn?
I think timing's of the essence, and we should give some direction tonight for ideas we want brought back for discussion on the 24th.
The 24th.
My quick number was 600,000 possibly. Okay, let's go with 500 is more realistic, and divide it into 3 pots. 1, reserves. We're going to be rating them pretty heavily. 2 is how do we find savings in that winter control budget by changing standards, being more efficient, whatever. And the 3rd one is what other departments are underspent in their budgets, and can we find some savings? So 150 each, and we're not too far off. Otherwise, $500,000 number in January is going to throw us for a loop.
Council, any comments on that? Councilor Grant?
Through you to the rest of council, I like that approach. I think that's a good way to kind of break it apart. I agree with Mr. Brenneman's statement as well. I think staff can come forward at any point with a recommendation on reduction of services. I just felt that a more fulsome discussion as we lead into that would put us in a good mind frame for that budget discussion. If we're looking at a service level reset, so to speak, that might be better. And just, I kind of plucked fall out of the air, but I was thinking before kind of that November, December potential snowfall that might help with finding some potential savings with that winter control budget.
Any other comments? Okay, is council in agreement? They would like to see this the 24th of June? David, does that work? Do you?
Yeah, that'll be quick, but I mean, we can come back with
something to get
some of
started?
our ideas, yeah.
Okay, then something for your agenda for the 24th of June. Okay, so there's no resolution needed for that one. We're going to move on to Colm's next report, which is the topic of Development Financial Analyst. And we'll get you to talk to that, and then we'll deal with your report from the previous council.
Sounds good. Thank you. Through you, Chair Bryant, to council. So based on the previous discussion, when we presented the Q4 2024 report, there was that urgent need identified for consultant assistance to help with the TCA backlog. Hemson, who you saw, Christopher, for example, and that team there, they're already familiar with our assets through the asset management plan work. Our initial thoughts were we could engage them as a separate piece of work to help them set us on the right path to address some of this backlog. It is a significant backlog. It's gone from 3 million in 2020 to over 60 million in 2024. So that will take quite a bit of time. As you can appreciate, consultants are very expensive. We went over on the financial side on the asset management plan because it's very labor intensive to do a lot of this calculations. But part of the discussion previously with council was, let's look at some of the financial resources in more broad kind of terms, and what kind of resources do we need? And through the Q4 report, where we had a $380,000 deficit, there's a $600,000 deficit, and very low reserve funds, there's kind of an urgent need to address some of these financial challenges. And part of the historic reason why we have some of these challenges, we just haven't had the resources in finance to really be proactive in addressing these more proactively, essentially. So I don't like, as much as council, these surprises. I feel like every time I'm giving more things that I'm finding. There's a lot of work that can be done more proactively. And one of the items that's really on the horizon is the growth that's happening right now in Breslau and throughout the township. So we're going from 30,000 to 68,000, a 125% increase, which would strain any township. But we have very limited financial resources to do any real analysis on some of that growth. So in addition to the TCA work, there's a real need with the interim control bylaw in place to really understand the impacts of growth, to look at our cash flow and our debt situation, and really understand and set a real financial plan on how we can address that growth. Because it is such a large scale, I put a number in there for 300 million for the next 10 years is what's currently in our DC study. And again, just in context, the most we've ever spent in our capital budget was in 2024 is when we spent 18 million. So we're looking at unprecedented amounts of spending, debt, forecasting, finances, even more strain on our reserves. And recent legislation has just going to compounded some of this pressure. So it's even going to strain our cash flows even further. And we just need some of that additional support, even on a contract or an interim basis, to support some of that work. So the current proposal here is a 2-year contract, calling a development financial analyst. Roughly 1/4 of the time would be spent on the TCA work, taking over from the consultant, and we could probably reduce the amount that we would need from the consultant to do this work. Because also with the new development, there's roughly $90 million that weren't included in the asset management plan for developer assumptions, because we just didn't have the information available. So there's also that capitalization that needs to occur in the next few years. So there's the additional backlog, but there's also a need in future years to address some of this. So the request is the 2-year contract position. In the first year, in 2025, because of the timing of getting this position onboarded and recruited, it's likely we wouldn't have it in place until August. So there would probably be 4 months that we would have to cover this year, which we would hope we could cover in the finance department through gapping from vacancies and other delays in onboarding staff that we could cover it ourselves in the finance department. In 2026 budget, we could look at other potential funding sources, including potentially using some developer revenue for that growth pays for growth component, but we'd have to flesh that out a little bit more and look at some of those funding mechanisms and some of our internal discussions. But we would have that further discussion during the 2026 budget. So the ask in front of you now is the development financial analyst to support growth related work, and also the TCA related work. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Director Lynn. I was going to mention that, for any lay person, member of the public who may be watching, could you explain TCA? But really, it's for me because I don't know what it is.
Absolutely. Through you, Chair Brian. So TCA are tangible capital assets. So I've used 2 acronyms in the report, in the previous report. I call it CIP and TCA. So CIP is construction in progress, and TCA are tangible capital assets. So the CIP component is any work that we have that's work in progress, essentially. So a road that may take 2 to 3 years to complete. In year 1, it would be kind of a construction in progress. In year 2, it's still a construction in progress. And then when you complete it in year 3, the idea is you would move that from construction in progress, and now we have an asset, and it's a complete road, and we have it on our balance sheet, and we're depreciating that asset essentially. So that's essentially what construction in progress means. What we haven't been doing, for at least what I can see from the last 5 years, is anytime a capital project has been completed, we haven't done that movement from the closed completed project and put it on our books, on our asset books. So it's still sitting in there as kind of construction in progress or work in progress. And it's been backlogged pretty much every year for the last 4 or 5 years. And so now we have roughly a $60 million backlog. So that's the construction in progress. So tangible capital assets are just refer to any infrastructure things that need to be capitalized. So there's the construction in progress portion. And then the other portion is any subdivisions that were completed by developers over the past couple years. They do work on our behalf. They complete the roads, they complete the lights, the curbs, all of that work. We need to assume those assets and put them on our books as well. And we haven't been doing, we have a 2-year at least backlog, roughly 40 million of those assets that also have to be assumed. And we have developments that are currently in progress. We know roughly of $50 million of additional assets that will also have to come on our books. And as we grow even further, that number is going to get bigger and bigger. So this is a long-winded way of saying, but part of that OCIF funding looks at our total asset value and our amortization expense. And so if you still have it as work in progress, it's not seen as a completed asset. So the province doesn't see your total asset value as big as what it actually is, or asset needs, until you capitalize and put those kind of on the books and in the financial statements. Hope that helps.
It does. It helps a lot. And just as a follow-up, so until we capitalize these assets, we're not going to maximize our OCFS funding?
Through you, Chair Brian, it's the OCIF funding. And the funding formula is very complicated, but a significant component of it is that total asset value and your amortization expense. There's other factors in there, but definitely one of the key factors is your total asset value, because if you have a smaller asset base, you get less funding. If you have a larger asset base, you get more funding, and having that amount of uncapitalized assets, we're just missing out on some of that funding.
Okay, any other questions, Council? Councillor Schwinn?
Couple of things. We've got some sort of project manager on the books for the new accounting system. How interchangeable, I guess, when we look at these different jobs we're talking about, are they? Can we pull someone in to start TCA work now and move them over to the accounting system in 6 months once we get some of the backlog done, or if other changes in your department happen? And we kind of plug and play, or these very specific roles?
Through you, Chair Brian, to Councillor Schwint. So maybe I'll take a step back and just explain kind of the previous budget approvals for the finance project. So you are correct. We did recently hire and onboard just last week a project manager for the finance software. And their role, I would say, is more IT specific. They were even previously in an IT department. And their expertise is on software implementation, system configuration, vendor management, process documentation, kind of looking at, Visio diagrams of processes, training, working with vendors and data scrubbing and that kind of thing. So that's this is a much more technical on the accounting side. Even I doubt that project manager, just like council, would know what TCA was. So I don't think that project manager position is really interchangeable. The other position approved by council, which we haven't hired yet, was backfill for finance staff during the finance software implementation. So the idea for that would be existing finance staff would have more work to do for the new system, to test, to configure, to meet with people, to document a lot of that. And throughout the department, there'll be a lot of extra work when we get to that system setup and testing kind of phase, that we would need additional support to backfill existing staff to help them do that testing related work. That would be more of, I would say, somewhat interchangeable. The only difference, I would say, this is a more highly technical type of work and analysis that's required. the work, at least we were anticipating that this would be more administrative, more lower end that could just backfill any lower end kind of work and not on that higher end technical side. But having said that, we haven't hired the position and there could be some overlap in some of that work if we hired this position that maybe they could backfill for some of that. The only caveat, I know, sorry, I'm being a little bit long-winded here, is that project was a very self-contained project for the financial software. This, what we're proposing here, has nothing really to do with the finance software and the implementation of that. But a dollar is a dollar, whether it's on the capital side or the tax side, and we're always looking to maximize the use of our resources. So,
Councillor Burgess, and then we'll come back. Oh, okay, then keep going.
Like, in response to that, I guess I've got concerns about hiring an expensive consultant on the TCA. I also forgot to ask when the next deadline is for that. So what that time crunch is, or if we're on board somebody who started out doing TCA, then flipped over to be that backfill person in December, February, whatever the case may be. They're already up to speed with the township itself. And I just wonder if that's a little bit more efficient and a quicker way of getting things done.
through you, Chair Bryant. So a couple things again, just for context, just to give council like a complete picture with some of this information. So the audit is happening currently right now. We're hopeful that if we have something in place and we can demonstrate to the auditors that we have a plan in place to address the TCA backlog, that it'll be sufficient to satisfy kind of that audit requirement going forward. It'll be a lot more difficult to say if we're not addressing it and it's a larger deficit and it's continuing to grow and we don't necessarily have a plan for that in place. So I think the important thing is either way, we need to show that we're making progress related to the TCA backlog. To your other point related to the backfilling of positions, it does make sense. So the reason this is coming now instead of during budget, for example, is because it takes so long to onboard staff. So we had a position approved in the previous budget in February, and it was just this week or last week where we actually got someone on board. So because of the interim control bylaw, because of the need for the TCA backlog and the need to really understand our growth, we can't really, it'll be this time next year before we have someone in place if we wait for budget to go through that cycle. And we'll be bypassing, I think, a lot of critical milestones with that. That's why it's coming at this point. And I do think if we had this position in place, we would have less of a need. I wouldn't say there's no need, but I would say the amount of backfill support that we would need for the project implementation would be reduced. Maybe we would just need them, a couple weeks or a couple months instead of 6 months or 8 months kind of thing. So I do think it could be used to backfill for some of the finance project work as well.
Okay, Councillor Burgess.
For you, Chair Bryant. Just a thought. I believe right now we have a highly technical qualified individual looking at our INIs and wastewater accounts, and that I assume for getting someone for a 2-month contract, this is a time crunch. It's going to take a while to get them on board. Are we going to get qualified candidates? Could we just look at extending that contract we have right now or giving them more hours? And he already knows our books. He knows our systems. He can just jump right in and kind of speed that up, and we can shorten that 2-year window. And yeah, it probably costs a bit more, but I get a return on investment better.
Through you, Chair Brian, to Councillor Burgess. So I don't want to talk about an identifiable individual too much and presuppose anything. He's already doing work on the water and wastewater side. I would say based on, and Director Poupée could speak more to this, but there's not a ton of capacity, or it's not really a full-time gig. So I'm not sure he would want to take on additional responsibilities over and above the work he's already doing. And also, again, not to speak for him, and the nature of this work may not be at the level that he would want to necessarily address $60 million of TCA, more kind of repetitive type of work. Again, we haven't necessarily broached that idea, but that would be a more expensive option as well. That's similar to the consultant route with the Hemson. That's why we went with the potential option to use Hemson, because they have a more capacity essentially to do more of this work that maybe that other individual would have.
Council, any other questions? David?
Just more of a summary comment, Madam Chair. I think in discussing this at the senior management table, the two critical things we were looking at from the lens was, with respect to bringing forth the original recommendation on the tangible capital assets and getting that in shape, timing was of the essence with respect to the audit and also with respect to the OSIF funding, because we want to position ourselves in a good way that way. I want to also emphasize that, one of the things I think we have to look at that Director Lynn has spoke to is you can't underscore enough how the proposed contract, two-year contract position is critical from a timing perspective in terms of the way we look at it, in terms of onboarding, because of the interim control bylaw and the fact that, as we've said at previous meetings, we need to make sure that when we're planning out future development, it's the three pillars: land use planning, infrastructure surveys, and what are the options for how that's all going to pay. Debt, developer front-ending agreements, future, hopefully, housing enabling funding from the province, the various situations. And so I just want to emphasize from a high level, that was a lot of the simple thinking, but scope thinking around the needs that we have here. Appreciate the discussion council is having around, well, can we leverage other? All we were trying to look at, quite frankly, was from a timing perspective, we need to get the tangible capital asset house in order. And we only have a year with respect to the interim control bylaw. And while we had originally looked at providing this position in next year's budget, as you know, we don't want to get challenged in the future with respect to some of the planning and development. And so we want to be able to complete not just the planning and servicing work, but the financial work with respect to the future of development financial planning as well. So just wanted to provide that overview.
Okay, any further questions, Council? Councillor Schwinn?
I guess I'm back to, I can support a 2-year position like this, but not and the consultant. To me, that's a good person on board and working fast. They're going to be more cost effective than a consultant. I'm not hearing that this month on a consultant is going to make a big difference. So to me, that's where I'm landing, I guess.
Any other comments? Councillor Burgess?
Through you, Chair. I kind of have the opposite opinion, but just sorry if you're repeating yourself, Director. Why 2 years? Why can't we just do it over a year, a shorter window there? Just since the time crunch is right now and we're having that consultant, can we just shrink this and then maybe extend it in a year if needed?
Through the chair, 2 years is probably a good time frame from recruiting someone. There's probably less interest on a 1-year kind of contract. The 2 years also gives us time to onboard and actually see real results. If we just started 1 year, you're onboarding them for 2 or 3 months, and then they're starting to get up to speed, and then they're gone. They're not really adding, I think, as much value in the first year. And I don't think our growth needs are going away anytime soon. I don't even think in 2 years they're kind of going away, but I think 2 years will get us enough of a financial foundation to at least understand some of those implications in the future. I did mention, like, in 2 years, we'll have $50 million of infrastructure that's coming on board now. So even if we got caught up on the backlog, we're going to be in the exact same place in 2 years, because that's just the scale of the infrastructure that's being built right now that we haven't been capitalizing.
Councillor Cadeau?
Thanks, Chair. To Director Lynn, I know you said the formula is kind of complicated, but if we were to bring on the $65 million, how much more funding would you ballpark we would get per year?
Through you, Chair Brian, to Councillor Cadeau. I've honestly tried to, I would have liked to come with some of that estimate because we're losing out on it this year, but we've lost out on it previous years, and trying to get a rough estimate of the amount of funding that we've lost over time. But it is a very complicated formula. It looks at the total asset values. It looks at like a benchmark throughout the municipalities. It also looks at our total household income, for example. So we get less OSIF funding because we have relatively high household income, because I've done some comparative analysis. So even though we have higher total asset values compared to other municipalities, we get lower OSIF funding. And all things being equal, it's because of the household, our high household income. The province essentially expects us to put more towards our assets than other municipalities. We have that capacity. So all that to say, it is a very complex formula. I would say roughly in the ballpark of anywhere from 50 to 150,000 a year of extra OSIF funding that we would get from this capitalization. Then I mentioned the future assets that are coming on stream, so it would probably be closer to that higher mark, the 150,000 each year, which would over and above pay for the salary for this position, in addition to the development work that would.
Any other comments, council? None? Okay, before you, you have a recommendation. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this one? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, any further comments? And I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Okay, and what we have to play catch up with is that we have the report from the council portion. It said that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report F11-2025 respecting the 2024 year-end Q4 financial report, approved the engagement of an external consultant to address the tangible capital assets accounting backlog with an upset limit of $35,000 to be funded from the operating contingency reserve. Any questions? No? I'm going to call the question. I need a mover. Sorry. No. Councillor Burgess, you have a question? You'll move it? Councillor Grant, second. Question?
Through you, Chair, to the Director. So just going off what Councillor Schwint was saying, but we've now hired the contract position here. If we were to not hire the consultant, what would that look like for you? And how would that play out for timing and time crunch and all that?
Through Chair Bryant to Councillor Burgess, I understand there's interrelationships between this. It's like either or kind of thing. So I do still feel that the consultant would be really valuable, really because of the delay on the onboarding, but also they could set up kind of a process and procedure of this is the way I would set things up. But with the new contract position in place, there definitely would be less of a need for kind of that extended period of time to address kind of the full backlog. They could just kind of set the ball in motion, and then this new position could take over from some of that. So that's where I would see that consultant being really valuable to get us up, that process up and running, and then this position taking over. So with this new position, because it wasn't originally considered with the Q4 report, I would feel more comfortable even lowering that upset limit if that would be council's direction. So you're not kind of duplicating some of that work to a lower amount, but I still think that consultant would be valuable to get us going.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I can kind of see what you're saying there. If we have the consultant kind of lay the path forward, then whoever you get in, whether they have a lot of experience or not in this program, they can kind of just jump right in, start working on it instead of having to figure out the big picture and how they're going to move forward.
Mayor Schantz?
Thank you. I just want to sort of bring us back to the finance department and what we're asking them to do in terms of budget in the fall and pulling all the pieces together with some additional staffing constraints. And so I wonder, Director Lynn, if you can put that in the context of will this position help you to help us to work better at the budget in the fall?
through you, Chair Brian, to Mayor Shantz. So we also have that senior financial analyst position recently onboarded, and my intention before this would be that position would be primarily dedicated to assisting with some of the council work and the requests coming for budget to give you a more informed picture, financial picture with a lot of the moving pieces for the budget. So that would be my focus and this senior financial analyst's focus. Hopefully we can get them up to speed and assist with that. We do still have those staffing challenges in the department as well with some of our day-to-day operating work. So that is going to be a challenge, and it will reduce some of my capacity just from the nature of the tax and utility operations. But I'm hopeful with that capacity, we can still get improved amount of information for the budget. This position, the reason this one was so important is we wouldn't have that capacity to address the TCA backlog in-house in addition to all of that work. And we wouldn't have the capacity to address all of the growth-related financial planning and all the developer contributions and all of this growth-related work in addition to the preparing for the budget. So this position could help with that extra over and above work, and the senior financial analyst and myself could help with the budget related work. So I think we're in, barring any further absences, I think we'll be okay, but I don't know what the additional day-to-day operating work will be with tax bills and utility bills and everything like that.
Any other questions, council? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. That would be carried. Thank you. Okay, so before we move to the next item, I'm going to pass the chair back to Mayor Shantz. Do we switch seats again, or do we just? Okay, do you need, oh, you got one? Okay. Okay, we'll just switch what we're doing.
Okay, this is a recommendation report from the Woolwich Heritage Committee, and I will ask Councillor Bryant as chair of the Woolwich Heritage Committee to present it. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. The Woolwich Heritage Committee is recommending that we proceed to the heritage designation for the St. Boniface Roman Catholic Church, Walled Cemetery, and Rectory at 1355 to 1357 Maryhill Road in Maryhill, which will include providing a notice of intent to designate under the Ontario Heritage Act. And we would like to direct staff to prepare the appropriate heritage designation bylaw for council's consideration following the notice period. Designating a property as having heritage value is governed under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Under the Ontario Heritage Act, municipalities can pass bylaws to formally designate properties of cultural heritage value or interest. If council wishes to proceed with the designation, a notice of intent to designate must be published in a local newspaper and served on the owner of the property. That's the Catholic Diocese of Hamilton and the Ontario Trust, Heritage Trust. If no objections are filed within 30 days, council can make a decision on whether to pass a bylaw designating the property or to withdraw the notice of intention to designate. If the bylaw is passed, it will be registered on title of the property. The designation bylaw includes a description of heritage attributes, which include the property, buildings, and structures that contribute to the property's cultural heritage value, which should be retained to conserve that value. If a property owner proposes to make changes to anything that would affect the attributes, the owner must receive council approval. If the property owner wishes to demolish the building, council may refuse to allow that demolition. If a notice of objection is served on the township with respect to a proposed designation, the matter is referred to the Conservation Review Board, Environmental and Land Tribunals. The Review Board deals with heritage matters in a similar manner to the Ontario Land Tribunal hearings. If designated, the property could be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, a joint initiative of the federal and provincial governments to recognize the country's heritage. It's a searchable database accessible via the internet. For comments, I'm not going to go through all the comments on the village and the attributes that go with it, but this property is highly valued by the residents of the village and the church members. They do want to see it preserved. The interdepartment impacts, we get secretariat support from the Corporate Services Department and planning support from Development Services. Financial impacts, it will cost us approximately $1,000 for the mailings and the newspaper ads that go with this. Community strategic plan impacts, the strategic plan Thriving Together. A blueprint for sustainable community growth recognizes that Woolwich has a rich history and heritage that we will continue to celebrate and honor. Designating properties that have significant heritage value for the community support this historic perspective. My voice is going away here. In conclusion, the Heritage Committee recommends that Council endorse proceeding with the designation for the St. Boniface Roman Catholic Church, Walled Cemetery, and Rectory, 1355 to 1357 Maryhill Road, Maryhill, in accordance with the requirements of the Heritage Act, including sending the required notice and drafting the appropriate bylaws. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Schwint.
Just curious response to the diocese, from the diocese or the church itself to this,
None. We've had no response whatsoever.
but they have been contacted.
They were sent an email prior to this being done about, I'm going to say about a month ago, roughly, maybe 6 weeks ago, and we've had no response.
Councillor Cadeau.
Do we have any other churches across the township that have been designated?
We do. We have Chalmers Church in Winterbourne is designated, and I don't think there is any in Elmira that I'm aware of. And I also believe Woolwich has one in West Montrose that's under the cultural heritage landscape, but I don't think it's got a heritage designation as such.
I wasn't sure of that one.
Yeah, I think it's just covered with the cultural heritage landscape and not an actual designation on that building.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Sean, it's just summarizing the comments you made there, Councillor Bryant. So if we put a designation on this, it's council specific, as in if they want to make changes, that's possible. There's nothing stopping them from making changes as long as we give approval.
What we are designating is the exterior of the building, and there may be a couple of things on the inside, and in the case of the church, such as potentially the altar or a couple of things like that, but it's usually the outside of the building.
But if they want to turn it into affordable housing in the future, say, or something, is that a possibility?
That's-
Can this be reversed, or are they, okay.
The designation would stand, but they can do things with the building, adaptable reuse. We're not saying you can't take the church and use it for other uses. That's not what the designation does. It just protects the exterior of the building. So they can't tear it down, or they can't rip the front off and put some, I don't know, big glass enclosure or something on it. It's to protect the integrity of the building.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, through you to rest of council. I'm really pleased to see this come forward. I think the church is a massive symbol for the village of Maryhill. It's something that whenever I've told people where I'm from, they go, oh, it's the church steeple I can see as I drive between Kitchener and Guelph. So with that, I'm very happy to see it come forward, and I would be happy to make a motion to move this.
Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Schwint. Further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried.
Thank you. I'm sure the committee will be very pleased to hear that, as will the residents of Maryhill.
I know that Maryhill is very proud of the church
They
and
are.
the cemetery and the uniqueness of the cemetery. And I've visited a few times and had tours, and they're always really proud
Yeah,
to show it off. So.
They are very proud of their enclave.
St. John Kilmarnock School Petition, Speed Camera and Community Safety Zone, and I will turn this one over to Councillor Bryant as well.
Thank you. I've had a conversation with one of the teachers at the school, and the students have gone out and put together a petition. They are very concerned with the traffic that travels up and down the road in front of the school. The sight lines are very poor. There's bends in the road and sort of a hilly area. So it's not the safest place for these parents with their children and young drivers and school buses to be pulling out of the school to make left-hand turns particularly. No one is following the 60-kilometer-an-hour speed zone. They are coming through there at 90 plus. And it's just, it's an unsafe environment. And so the kids have gone together, and they would like to see a speed camera put in, and they want to community safety zone created in front of the school for their safety. And so they've brought the petition forward and they're hoping the council will support them on this one.
Council?
I'll start us off by just commending the students of the school for organizing to this level and putting forth a petition like this. I think that it's really impressive for them to have done something like this. When it comes to the municipal speed cameras, something that we've talked about already today, we are awaiting on some engagement with regional staff and some feedback. And so I would probably like to defer this until we get more information around what that looks like before we direct staff to do anything with this.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Poupey. I'm wondering, with it being a regional road, is it possible for us to install a municipal speed camera, appreciating that the region has its own plans on what they would like to do about school zones on regional roads? I'm just, in the event that we would like to install a municipal speed camera on a road that is a regional road, is that something that we could do?
Yeah, through your chair, Brian, to Councillor Grant. So for clarity, the ASE program is completely run by the region of Waterloo. However, the way it is set up currently is that the local or the area municipalities have the ability to prioritize locations within, so in this case, within the township. And I think the important piece here too is that the school in question is on that list. And regional council did direct staff, regional staff, to install ASE at every school zone. So the way I understand the region's plan is that they will be enacting community safety zones at every school zone on a regional road. And again, further, my understanding is that the current initiative then, and I think that's under review, but the way it stands until that review is finished, is that they are looking to impose a 40-kilometer zone, I think is the way I understand it currently, but that I believe is under review as part of the rural strategy. So that's the information I have, but it wouldn't be at a 60 is what I understand it to be as well. So, but again, stay tuned. The intent is for us to get that information. Obviously, Mayor Shantz has that ability to request further information. So I will look to get some further information by the 24th of June from regional staff and update this council. And then maybe between myself and the mayor, we can provide some better information to council.
Councillor Kiddo?
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, I'm just wondering if anybody from region has been notified of this petition and whether or not it's been shared with them for their information.
It hasn't gone to the region. It came here first with the hope that this would be taken forward to the region. She's tearing up.
They're aware.
Okay. Yeah, I can certainly work with Jared on getting some of that information about where that policy is coming from. I also believe, because we've had some concerns with the 80, 60, 40 and down to 40 on the rural roads, that the region was going to focus more on urban areas. So this would be an exception to where we've sort of asked them to go in other situations. But I appreciate that
And one of
it's
the
a
big
different situation.
And one of their big concerns is the fact that there's a gravel pit that has just opened with large loaded trucks now running this road, and that's one of their big safety concerns.
I appreciate that. And I think the other question that came up earlier was, is there some other traffic calming? Was that you, Councillor Schwint, that can be done there? I just make a note because it's late. And I might forget by morning. Okay.
Councillor Burgess had a call.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you. I guess my only comment to this is these kids went through all this effort, and sometimes governments are known to drag their feet and delay things. I want to encourage what they're doing and promote it, and yeah, get stuff done for them, and yeah, get them liking government. So I'd prefer to move something here to send it to the region and kind of endorse it, but
I like kids being proactive.
yeah.
So motion to
Motion to
send this
support.
petition to the region, separate from the other work we're doing, just, yeah. Counselor Schwint?
Along that line, I'd like more information coming back, but Councillor Burgess is right about supporting kids and doing initiatives. So I think this deserves a response. Nice little letter from the mayor saying, thank you for this. We've had a big, long conversation. It's coming back in the agenda. These are things we're doing, blah, blah, blah. Because it's so important to get engagement
Yeah.
from our constituents. We can't get people to vote.
Yeah.
So this is the way to start
You
from
do.
young.
Youthful engagement, I think, is so important. Yeah, if you want to send it to me, I'll get it off to the teacher.
Or two.
Watch the meeting.
Well, if they can watch it after the fact, yeah.
Okay, we'll get something together.
Thank you.
Did I have a motion on the floor? I think. Yeah.
I was wondering, I
Yeah.
heard direction, but I also heard a motion, so.
So it's moved and seconded that this petition get sent to the region along with a letter to the school and a letter to the region explaining what it's about. Pretty much summarized. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, thanks. And finally, notice of motion, opposition to strong mayor powers and request for removal. Next, council will review the notice of motion regarding strong mayor powers. Councillor Bryant, as this was your notice of motion, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you. I only put this on because I think it's something council needed to be aware of, and I think there's been a lot of small communities are pushing back because there's looking at it as an erosion of democracy, basically is what they're saying, because the power is being concentrated in one area. They're looking at it as American style politics, and there's some upset with the way it was handled. I think there was very, very limited consultation with the public and municipalities as to how this was going to come into play. So I just wanted to put it there for discussion purposes.
Okay, council. Sorry, this is on for tonight or for next?
Through you, Mayor Sean, on is a notice of motion, so we typically allow the mover to, the bringer of the notice to provide a description like that, and then questions or comments, but no debate or voting until next week, 2 weeks from now.
Thank you for that clarity, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. This is more of a comment. I appreciate you bringing this forward, Councillor Bryant. I do fear that the province has been pretty strong on this being a thing to stay. I do think there may be some benefit in having a discussion next week about whether we want to amend some of this to ask for increased consultation with municipalities, as this is a pretty prescriptive, what the province has put down, where it maybe is not something that can be applicable to all municipalities. So I think more consultation with smaller municipalities would be beneficial for the province.
Yeah, this was put out by another municipality.
Anyone else? Okay, so this will come back in 2 weeks. Okay, I'll pass the chair back to you.
Oh, it goes back. Yeah, hold on, I gotta find my papers. Okay. Page 11. Okay, so now we would be moving on to other business. Do we have any mayor report on regional matters?
We
We do, we don't.
My brain's getting mushy at this time of night. I'm sorry. I started at the region at 9 o'clock this morning. So I should have some reports. Well, we did meet with the region on Monday morning, bright and early to discuss. I'm sorry.
That's okay, you're doing the blank.
It was Councillor Schwint and myself, so there was a few of us there, but it was more. Okay, I'm sorry that I'm
That's
tripping over
okay.
this. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a big contingent from the region discussing the Arthur Street reconstruction and Elmira bypass. Concerns were raised by Councillor Cadeau a month or two ago about process and timelines. And this was a good chance for us to understand where the region was at and how we can move the process along and get community engagement. I think it's a good chance for us to understand better where the region's at and hear their plan for consultation in the fall. That this council should spend some time at a future date doing a better job of strategizing how do we influence the region. It's one thing to have an opinion. Mayor Shantz sits on regional council and voices it, but sometimes I think if you're on an island, it's tough. I'm not too sure that it's, I guess, appreciated by council of township councillors delegate. I'm not sure on that, but I get the impression it's not the best course of action sometimes. So how can we better represent our township regionally and give support to our representatives there? So that's my two take homes. I do think there'll be a consultation process in September on some options for Arthur Street, and the bypass hopefully will be right along with that.
Okay, I have a question for the mayor. Do we not have committees that township representatives sit on anymore? I know we used to in the past.
There are, and we've had a couple of meetings, and then on the bypass, and sort of connected with Arthur Street, I guess we've had both. But it's been a long time since they've met. I think, Councillor Cadeau, you were on the Arthur Street Committee. Do you remember when that last met? Or
Correct.
maybe-
So it was in February, and that was largely where my concerns had stemmed from, that Councillor Schwint had noted that it had been a long gap without much in terms of an update. So really fortunate to get that update on Monday.
Thank you. And any other
Okay.
report? No?
No, I don't think so. I'm just going over the agenda from today. We did some discussions on GRT. We did an asset management plan. It's kind of similar to what we're doing here. The GRT report, we had a couple of concerns just to ensure that Kiwanis Transit still is able to operate, because they operate differently from Mobility Plus. And so one of the concerns that I raised was to ensure that that the good things that Kiwanis Transit is doing don't get lost in some of the other changes that they're looking to make in the cities, and reminding them again that the townships are different.
Yeah.
And we sometimes need different solutions. I think that was the biggest piece.
Okay, thank you. Any council reports, updates? No? Outstanding activity list? No, seeing none. Items pulled from the information package, any? No? Items for information and public notice, none. Well, that brings us to the end of the regular meeting of council. On behalf of council, we thank all those who watched here or at home, and we sincerely appreciate all those who took the time to participate tonight. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Burgess, all in favor? That would be it. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I think everybody's tired.
Wow.